everyone, welcome to A Tribute to Dennis Tanner. We have put together a special episode for you today, which has got some information about his return and some more of his backstory, because we did do a Dennis Tanner character profile before, but we thought that we would update it because we know a lot more about Dennis now than we did then.
Well, this is in the light of the sad news recently of Philip Lowrie's passing. He died on the 25th of April, so just a couple of weeks ago. And Dennis Tanner, well, there's so many character profiles that we did back in the early days of the podcast that are all a bit naff and over and done within 15 minutes. I mean, maybe people like that, I'd probably do some of them. But this is a good opportunity to go back, revisit the character. We've watched a heck of a lot more of his early days since then. And he's one of our favourite characters as well, isn't he? It's no secret that Gemma absolutely adores Dennis Tanner. In fact, sitting in our podcasting room right now, we've got about 3 pictures of him somewhere on the wall behind us.
I know we've got that really nice one of him.
I think we do, of Pat Feeney. Yeah. Maybe we've got a few anyway. And so we're going to be doing a bit of a character profile / it's going to be a bit different. We're not just going to be running chronologically through everything that he did, although that will form part of it. We're going to be looking at different aspects of his life, trying to figure out why he's one of our most favourite characters, reminiscing over some of the funny scenes that we've seen and that we've enjoyed. And hopefully, as Gemma said earlier, giving a bit of info for people who are still possibly a little bit in the dark about who Dennis Tanner actually is. And I tell you what, as a Corrie original, as someone who was there right in the first episode of Coronation Street, you should all know who this guy is. He's a proper important legend. He's been in the show longer than Ken Barlow.
Yeah, technically.
Dennis Tanner was the first man ever to appear on Coronation Street.
Yeah,
did you know that?
What a legacy.
I know, totally is. So, just a bit of backstory for him then. So, his stats. So, his birthday was the 1st of April, 1942. I love that for him. I think it's very fitting that he's an April the 1st birthday. He died somewhere in 2020.
I think it might have been the year before because when was the 10,000th episode? Was it in January?
It was January, February sort of time.
Might have died the year before.
Well, I just got it off Corriepedia. Okay. His dad was Arnold Tanner, his mum Elsie Tanner. He got one sister, Linda Chavesky. He got married twice, once to a girl called Jenny Sutton in 1968, and then again to our Rita in 2012. First appeared on Coronation Street on that debut episode, the 9th of December 1960, and we last saw him on the 30th of July 2014.
Although he did appear as a corpse.
He did, not a corpse. Yeah. He appeared as an urn. He appeared in ashen form, didn't he, on Coronation Street's 10,000th episode. He himself was in 677 episodes of Coronation Street.
Days.
It is kind of nothing these days.
I think Frankie's been in it more.
Well, he's now the 97th most featured character by number of episodes, so he's going to be dropping off that list at some point, sadly, for the legacy of the character. But I did find it interesting that his one person above him on that list currently is Julie Carp, his long-lost niece, in a way.
She's not going to make any more.
She's not going to make any more, and neither's he, so it's nice to know that they're kind of bonded together with a similar number of episodes.
Who's 98 then?
I don't remember. I didn't remember them all. Philip Lowrie was the actor who played him. As we said, he died just a couple of weeks ago. I think it's worth, before we crack on with talking about Dennis, just having a look a bit of over the life of Philip Lowrie, a little bit of an obituary, if you like, for him. And we did mention this on the podcast recently, but no harm in putting it here again. So he was born in Ashton-under-Lyne to Bertha and Philip Lowrie in 1936. So he is actually that much older than Dennis Tanner himself is. Interestingly, he was called Colin. His real name is Colin Philip Lowrie. Philip is his middle name, and Philip is his dad's name as well. But his stage name, he went by his middle name, which is also his dad's name. I'm sure there was no confusion in that household when the postman came.
Yeah, I bet I would have cashed a few checks if I was old dad.
So when he was young, he had a stammer, and he went to elocution lessons to try and get it fixed. And it worked, and you wouldn't know to listen to him, would you? After secondary school, he ended up going to RADA, don't you know, in London for 3 years alongside Christine Hargreaves, who then went on to play Christine Hartman in Coronation Street. They weren't in the same class, apparently. I was listening to an interview that he did with the Distinct Nostalgia podcast a few years ago, and he spoke a little bit about that. And he said, they were there at the same time, but not necessarily moving in the same circles.
That's usually code for us. She was a bitch.
Well, it's too late to say anything about that. It was really interesting, this interview. I just wish that we got him on our podcast.
I know, it's really annoying.
We've missed our chance. We really, really did. He talks a little bit about how close and how much camaraderie there was between the young performers on Coronation Street in the early days, and he and Christine and some of the others, Bill, I think, would go off and have wild parties together or go off to restaurants together. It's really funny because you see, these days you get the young guns on Coronation Street appearing on each other's Instagram stories, don't you? And you can you kind of picture a young Philip Lowrie posing next to Lucille Hewitt or what have you back in.
She might have been a bit young.
Maybe she was a little bit young there. But anyway, I thought that was really nice that they were linked right from the early days. We watched The Road to Coronation Street the other day.
He wasn't in it.
He wasn't in it at all. So that was the drama that they made in 2010 to celebrate Coronation Street's 50th anniversary, and it was mostly the story of creator Tony Warren, but there was a good number of characters from that early lot who appeared.
Well, because it was mostly about the dry run. And he was not in the dry run. He wasn't cast.
Yeah, you're right, actually. You're absolutely right, because he came in a bit later. So his first appearance on TV was only a couple of years before Coronation Street. Although he did say on this other interview that I listened to that Corrie was his first thing. But I think what he did before Coronation Street were like televised plays, which were quite the thing back then.
I don't think many of them have been saved either.
No. So IMDb lists Saturday Playhouse in 1958 as his first telly role. And then he did a couple of uncredited things. But yeah, Coronation Street was his first proper telly performance. He did a lot of theatre work as well, as many actors do, or did back in those days anyway. Lots of rep theatre work. He even appeared on the West End in the John Varry play Farewell, Farewell, Eugene. So he had quite a nice boost to the start of his career. But Dennis Tanner was the part that he got in 1960, aged 24. The character that he played was 22 though, so as is often the case these days, you had a slightly older actor. No, not much, but the character was then later aged down another 4 years at some point. Probably
he
because
he wasn't ever 18 in the show.
No, but some people have suggested that it's because he was quite close in age to Elsie Tanner, his mum. I think she was 37, 38. I
think she was 37
maybe when the show started. So they wanted to just increase that age gap a little bit, which is fair enough. He was the first male character on the programme in the second scene where he's there arguing with his mum about not being able to get a job. The number of times we've watched that first episode, I couldn't count, but that's a really classic scene, isn't it? Then he's coming down the stairs. She's accusing him of taking money out of her purse. Yeah, it's brilliant. I found it interesting. You said earlier about the fact that he wasn't cast around the time of the dry runs, and they found it very difficult to cast him, didn't they?
Yeah.
He said that there were 70 people who auditioned to play Dennis Tanner, which is crazy considering, it was really quite a bold move and a bit of a risk, a chance to even put Coronation Street together to begin with in the first place. Nobody knew it was going to be any kind of success, let alone one that was going to go 65 plus years.
They also really wanted a northern actor. So I wonder how many of those were not actually northern actors who were chancing.
Yeah, I wonder.
Because the accent doesn't, as long as you can do a northern accent, most of the actors from the early days did not speak the same way that their characters did, even though they were northern, because they'd been trained in elocution.
Yeah, it'd been beaten out of them by those elocution lessons. So Kenneth Farrington, who later became Billy Walker on Coronation Street, was pretty much going head to head with Philip Lowrie for the part, and then in the end they liked Kenneth so much that they wrote the part of Billy especially for him.
That's
but
nice.
Yeah, Philip was the one that got it.
It wouldn't have worked with him as I can't think of anyone else playing this character. Dennis Tanner was
can't. But the character was created was devised to be different, and you can see in his first few episodes they were going down the route of he's just come out of prison, he's a bit of a troublemaker, and he didn't have that comedy quite so much, or it wasn't written into the script quite so obviously as it was later on. But because of Philip's brilliant comedic stylings, that's the direction that they went. And I don't know whether, I don't know what Kenneth Farrington was like in real life, but Billy Walker was not a comedic character. But I could see Billy Walker being a bit like how Dennis Tanner was originally supposed to be.
That's what I was just about to say. I think that you can see the darkness in Billy Walker that Kenneth Farrington would have brought to the role of Dennis Tanner.
Yeah, for sure. But Philip Lowrie was destined for a part on Coronation Street in one way or the other, because he'd actually auditioned for the part of Ken Barlow as well.
Imagine if he had been Ken and we still had it. Well,
this is the thing, we wouldn't would we? Because he didn't want to stay in Coronation Street for too long. He had kind of itchy feet and he wanted to try other things. And I know that William Roach has spoken in the past about thinking about moving on at one point, and there have been moments where Coronation Street could have diverged down another path and we'd have lost Ken 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But
after a certain point you're like, I've got to stick with this, I guess.
Imagine if William Roach had got the part of Dennis Tanner and he'd be the character that was still there
really
all these years later.
That would have been...
There's a what if for you.
And it would have been the Barlows, it would have been the Tanners.
The Tanners would have been the number one family in the street.
Interesting.
Yeah. So when Dennis was cast, he was living in London. He went up north for the audition, got the train back, and as he stepped into his flat that evening, the phone was ringing. It was his agent saying, get back on that train again, get up north, you're rehearsing on Monday. This was a Friday this happened, so it was such a quick turnaround. Audition Friday, into Corrie on Monday, because... it was going to go out live later that week. Yeah. So that first week was the auditions, the rehearsals for him, and because
they did the dry
Thursday
runs.
Or Friday was the actual thing.
They did the dry runs, and there were two different people playing.
That was weeks before, wasn't it?
And they didn't like either of them, I guess. Yeah. And then they cast Dennis, and he.
Yeah, the road to Coronation Street really hones in on the fact that the original actress they had playing Ina Sharples in the dry runs wasn't quite right for the part, wasn't it? But yeah, apparently it looks like it was the same for Dennis Tanner as well. So Dennis did stay through the show for the first year and a bit. He was in it all the way through 1961, and the end of 1961 is when they had the equity strike, which we've spoken about quite a bit on the podcast before, where actors who were in equity, whose contracts ran out by a certain point, couldn't work between, November 1961 and May 1962 or so. But luckily, Philip had just signed his contract before then.
Everybody that stayed were big characters who just literally signed their contracts.
Back in July, I think. So he stayed on. And there was actually quite a lot of Dennis during that time. But then...
I think this was one of my favourite areas of Dennis, because he was so chaotic.
Yeah, and there's so much of it that's not available on YouTube at the moment, but we have seen choice clips from that era, and he really is kind of peak. He's hilarious. Absolutely love him.
Cheeky.
And to have a character... to have... There was only 12, 13 characters on the show at all during that strike, and we were just so lucky in the characters that we got, and the fact that they pushed this talent to the forefront was just superb. But yeah, by the time the equity strike was just about to finish, he decided that he wanted to move on and try something different. Although he then spent about a year basically not being able to work, and he'd already been typecast a little bit as Dennis Tanner. So by the time 1963 rolled round, he was like, let me back in again. And then April 1963 was when he made his return to the script. And I love the story. We've got Jack Rosenthal, who was a vintage Corrie writer, once married to Maureen Lipman. Apparently he cried when he wrote the script that said "Enter Dennis" in, because it was such a special character to him. Yeah. So he stayed in Coronation Street then from 1963 to 1968. Again, he just wanted to do different things, partly, but also because he felt that Dennis was never growing up. He said in an interview once, I did get very tired of him being Peter Pan. I always looked younger than I was, and I didn't mind playing down a bit, but I just wanted him to grow up as an adult. When I left, I was 32, and he was still about 22. They wouldn't let him grow up. Now, he was older than 22, the character, but...
He always acted like a bit of a silly idiot.
Yeah, like, he did.
Naive and enthusiastic.
And not in the same way as, like, Kirk, who's got the brains of a 4-year-old.
He wasn't stupid.
He wasn't stupid at all, but he was, just a bit
gullible,
naughty.
maybe.
Yeah, gullible is a good way of putting it. He's just full of energy and full of life, and he's just so fun to watch. But in some ways,
no one like him on the street now.
No, I don't think there is.
I mean, Graham Proctor was a little bit like him.
I don't know. Possibly.
I think Graham Proctor was a bit laid back and cool.
Yeah, I mean the thing about Dennis Tanner as well, he was also very camp as well, and that fit perfectly in Coronation Street and helped make him fun to watch, because I think some of the camper characters are some of the most camp. There was a lot of campness in Coronation Street back in those days. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, he wanted to leave. He wanted to try something else. He was fed up of playing this man-child, if you like. But it did cause quite a bit of friction between him and Pat Phoenix, who played his telly mum Elsie Tanner. The story goes that when he told her that he was leaving, she was so upset that she refused to talk to him anymore. Yeah. Apart from when they were filming, when they had to. And
I think maybe they made up.
I think I think they made up.
But she was really I mean, there's a lot of really classic duos on Coronation Street. You can look back and think that this character didn't work without the other one.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think you can say that about Pat, but she certainly didn't want him to leave.
They were a really, really lovely mother.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Jenny and Daisy, where I know that Sal's not upset at all with Charlotte Jordan, in case anyone wants to read anything into it.
She's upset that I think she's probably upset that she's gone.
She's not mad at her.
That tweet was a bit of a giveaway that she was still in denial about.
But that's what I mean,
it,
the like just losing somebody as a scene partner that you work and vibe off so well. Yeah. It must be really hard.
Can you imagine like Barbara Knox like sending Thelma Barlow to Coventry after she decided that she was going to leave in the late 90s? So it was a big move for him, because he was on £250 a week in Coronation Street and he went down to £20 a week in Rep Theatre. And it does show the love of the craft, I suppose, if you're willing to take such a pay cut to move on and do something that you really want to do.
Also shows how good those equity deals ended up being.
Well, yeah, so it does show that as well, doesn't it? So after Corrie, he did various telly and theatre jobs, but he still struggled to shake off that typecasting that the role of Dennis had led to.
I mean, even more so now, where soap actors get typecast and kind of belittled. Even Danny Dyer from EastEnders has recently got himself in hot water by...
He has had a few choice words, hasn't he?
A little bit the experience of being a soap actor. But back when Philip Lowrie was Dennis Tanner, it was one of the biggest television shows almost in the world. Yeah,
he was definitely up there with one of the most recognisable telly faces in the country. Yeah, if not the world, I guess. So he just didn't want to be him anymore. He was fed up.
Didn't want to be Dennis.
Didn't want to be Dennis anymore. Then he struggled to get work, but then he was also having people bombarding him with questions all the time, apparently saying, when are you back, when are you back, when are you back? And he didn't want to. I heard that he kind of shied away from Corrie related publicity for quite a while afterwards, because he wanted to say, no, I'm more than just Coronation Street, and it's fine to do. It's understandable, and sometimes it can be sad for fans, because we still all love you as this role in our favourite TV show. But if you're
going to put yourself in a box and say I'm more than it's difficult, because it affects your career and how much you can earn and your opportunities that you get given. So it's really easy as a fan to sort of take it personally and be like, well, come on.
We put you here.
Well, not like that, but like, there's no reciprocal affection for like the concept of somebody liking you.
Yeah.
But when you're like losing work and you can't afford your bills.
You do hear about these people saying, I don't want to be linked to that anymore, but then later on in their lives realising, you know what,
looking back on it.
Yeah, you got it with like Christopher Eccleston in Doctor Who as well, haven't you? When he left after that first series. I think these days he is acknowledging a little bit more that he wasn't in the show.
Because he really did not like people bringing it up.
Yeah, but one little thing that I found that was quite fun from Philip Lowrie was apparently in an interview in 1971, he expressed quite an envy for Anne Reid for being killed off on Coronation Street on screen. So this was Ken's wife, his first wife, Valerie Barlow, who died by getting electrocuted by a hairdryer. And he was like, I wish that that had happened to me, because people don't ask Anne Reid when she's going back to Coronation Street. Anyway, luckily for him, as time went on, more telly opportunities did open up for him. He got involved in a lot of Victoria Wood's comedy programmes. He was in some episodes of War and Peace, the drama, episode of The Liver Birds, couple of appearances on Casualty, and then Doctors, going into the 21st century. I don't think he did the bill, actually. I think he might have swerved that one.
He's like, I don't want to be typecast as a cheeky villain.
Stage really was a big love for him as well, and I know that he did lots of tours there. He worked
I'd seen him.
I know he did work at the Liverpool Playhouse, Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, so that was my local theatre growing up. I could have seen him then if only I'd known. Perth Theatre, he went all over. He played the Mousetrap in 2004, 2005, playing Major Metcalf. And yeah, as time went on, he was more and more positive about his time in Coronation Street. And eventually, I think when they did something in 2010, a 50 years, 50 moments kind of programme, he was a talking head on there, and finally going, yeah, okay. And that's what got him back into Coronation Street as well. I think he did that, and his agent was like, ooh, maybe we could get more of that. I did want to just diverge slightly from his life story here by going back in time a little bit, because it wasn't just telly and theatre that were his showbiz loves, was it?
No, he liked to do a bit of a sing-song.
Yeah, briefly, you know.
Just like his real life character, Dennis Tanner, who wanted to be a star but realised he didn't have the talent. Mm-hmm. Perhaps Philip Lowrie realised that although I thought it was a very catchy song, I don't think that there was a market for his particular brand of vocal styling. I love this song. This song is so silly.
You still get soap stars these days. You still get soap stars these days, or maybe it was more of a late 90s, early 2000s thing, that want to give pop stardom a try. I mean, who can forget Adam Rickett? It worked for Kylie. But
Kim Marsh went the other way.
Kim Marsh did go the other way. But yeah, Philip Lowrie did release a single in 1963, September 63, called I Might Have Known.
Please look this up.
It's on YouTube. I Might Have Known. Philip Lowrie. It's only 2 minutes long. It's a comedy song.
Yeah, I love comedy songs.
It's about... basically, the song is saying, women, what are they like, eh? Pff, the song, isn't it? And
it's really offensive.
It's offensive
to modern sensibilities,
yes.
But I didn't find it. I thought it was hilarious and silly, and I can imagine Dennis Tanner trying to get famous with this song and it not working.
Yeah, it's basically kind of saying these women just want to marry you, and I just want a bit of fun, and
well, yeah, it's like no matter what I do,
I need her to do the cleaning.
Away.
Yeah, and like towards the end of the song, he's like, I'm probably gonna beat you up if you don't leave me alone.
I don't mind. It's like, I might have known.
I might have known you wouldn't have mind. It's quite funny. It's quite funny.
It's very silly. It is very, very silly.
Yeah.
Worth
just listen
listening.
to it with your 1963 ears on. It's a bit George Formby-esque, isn't it?
It is.
There's only so much even singing on the song.
He's not really very good at
he's
singing.
No.
I don't know whether he was good at singing in general, but there was no demonstration of much talent beyond what I could do on that record.
Anyway, but he's got the charm.
I find it very inspiring. Yeah, he need charisma.
This is the thing. He was so charismatic and charming.
Yeah.
With his brilliant smile and energy and enthusiasm and joie de vivre, that it's like he could do whatever and it would be infectious. Yeah. I think. So anyway, 43 years away from the show, he came back to Coronation Street in the role of Dennis Tanner in 2011, which earned him the Guinness World Record for the longest break from a programme of an actor playing the same character.
Yeah.
Right? So nobody had taken as much time off of a show as he did, and that was pretty cool for him, although it was later broken. But I think two Doctor Who characters broke it.
Rude.
Yeah, William Russell is currently the record holder there, but still pretty cool nonetheless. So 2000 he stayed until 2014, and this is when Stuart Blackburn, the producer, axed him. It was Phil Collinson was producer at the time when he brought him back into the show. Stuart was like,
go back in time.
Nope. And
I appreciate this more.
I know. And I remember being quite cross when they decided to get rid of him. He definitely went through an era of not having loads to do, but you don't expect that the characters who are, in their late 70s are going to have loads to do. It was just lovely having him there.
I know.
And we're going to start off by talking about his comeback before we hit some of the early storylines, just because that was what was
Yeah, we're talking about our experience of him as a character.
Experience, yeah. But yeah, according to sources at the time when this news broke, Philip Lowrie did not see it coming at all. Apparently, the writers didn't think his character was viable anymore. And
Which is not. I just don't think that's true.
No, he wasn't front and center, but he was his kind of character in the cabin having fun. But good pairing with Rita. Not everybody liked the Rita and Dennis relationship. I thought it was kind of sweet. And there's so few characters in that age bracket. I think he was totally viable. I think that was. I get
super offended when they say this because it's so insulting to the actor and the writing team. There's just what they mean is there was no appetite to think too hard about it.
No, I don't remember seeing any interviews from Philip at the time when that was announced or when he left the programme.
Well, I got the impression from was it Cunningham who played.
Oh yeah, who played Linda Chavesky.
I've forgotten her name. Her first name.
Yeah, no, I can't remember.
But I got the impression from various quotes she's given that he found this to be quite insulting.
Yeah,
or
because
he was not happy.
Yeah, there's now only 3 Corrie originals left alive. Obviously, William Roach, who plays Ken Barlow.
Is it Christine Cunningham?
I don't know, you're the one, you got the phone there, who played Linda Chavesky, his sister, and then you got Alan Rothwell, who played David Barlow, Ken's brother. Now, he ain't coming back into the show because he got killed off in the late 1960s, but any hopes of Linda coming onto the show
she would never,
sadly dashed.
What they did to
yeah, she said, not if the stories that Philip say about my time in Coronation Street are true, but I don't know whether that's just Corrie in general or it's how Cunningham, there you go, or whether it's how they treated him. But it's a shame because I just love the idea of somebody coming back from episode 1 now.
Yes, I know. When my wildest dreams of like you always imagine when you're criticising the producers all the time when you're a Coronation Street fan, because that's being
what we do.
It's like being a football fan and moaning about the manager. You always imagine like, what would I do if I was a producer? And I always thought I would immediately phone Philip Lowrie up and go, whatever they did or said, I am sorry. What can I do to get you back?
Yeah, we don't know how long he's been sick, how sudden his death was recently. The statement that came out from his publicist, Mario Renzullo, a couple of weeks ago said, "My client and very dear friend Philip Lowrie, the beloved actor renowned for his role as Dennis Tanner on Coronation Street, passed away yesterday at 88. His death marks the end of an era for the world's longest running soap where he became a cornerstone of its storytelling." So it's not telling us much. I've not seen anything about funeral plans, although I guess that, it's going to be happening soon.
Anne Cunningham must have written this quote.
Oh, yeah, I've got actually the quote here.
Well, she must have written this quote after his death.
Maybe. Do you want to read it?
Well, she says, "From our first meeting on day 1 of Coronation Street, Philip was truly like a brother to me.
Yeah, you're right.
And we remained very close all his life. No acting required. He was a loving uncle at family gatherings and will be sorely missed."
Yeah. So this was her tribute. It's one of these tributes flood in too, and she was the lead tributer.
I want to talk to Anne Cunningham. I want you to. I'm just scared.
So that's our life story of Philip Lowrie. A life very full and well lived, I'm gonna say. But let's move on to the character of Dennis now, the one that we know a little bit more intimately. And I want to talk about his comeback first, only because that's really the first experience that we had of Dennis. Yes, we'd seen a few of the early episodes beforehand, but I didn't know him from Adam really when he came back into the show. It felt like, people are saying this is a big thing, and I guess it is if he's not been in it for so long. But there was no kind of like, oh hooray, it's him. I was just like, okay.
I know.
People say that's pretty good, so I'll see.
I mean, I'm going to give a little bit of a petty confession here, is in that at the time, so this was 2011, we hadn't seen any old Coronation Streets particularly, and I'd only been watching it since
we'd seen the first episode,
2000 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I always got quite. We always got comments from people when we did the podcast going, Coronation Street was better, it used to be better, Coronation Street was better in the old days, Coronation Street was better in the old days. And so when somebody came into the show like Philip Lowrie from the old days, I was like, I'm kind of tired of hearing about how great it used to be, because I think it's quite good now. And so I think I might have had my back up a little bit about, is this, how can this be any better than what, I don't really buy into this idea, because I think that there's just this general air of nostalgia and rose-tinted glasses about everything in this country. Like, people, I assume it's a global thing, but everything used to be better. Every single thing you could possibly imagine used to be better 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and you're fed up with it about hearing it. So when they said Philip Lowrie's coming back as Dennis Tanner, I was like, okay, well, he's going to have to prove himself to me, because I don't know who this guy is.
And he did.
And he really did.
He really, really did.
But do you know what I mean about that?
Yeah, for sure.
You kind of get bored of hearing it, but now I'm one of the people that says it. Yeah. So it's kind of, I guess it's karma, isn't it?
You learned a lesson there.
I did.
So he spoke a little bit about getting the call to go back on Coronation Street, and said, my agent was emailing the new producer at the time saying, could the character of Dennis Tanner be resurrected? And at the same time, it appeared that Barbara Knox was also talking to the producer and saying it would be a good thing to bring back the character as well, because Rita and Dennis had a liaison some time ago. Phil Collinson, the producer, thought it was a good idea. The story writers thought it was a good idea. And that's how it came about. So as simple as that.
I wonder whether, you were saying about who's alive that was in the first episode. Would anyone care if somebody came back who was in a 70s episode or an 80s episode, or is it just that cachet of being from the original episode, and then it's kind of diminishing returns?
You're in a unique small group if you're in that 15 or so characters who were in that first episode. It probably wasn't even that, but having a character
who would
back
come
from
back
I don't know,
from the 70s.
Like they did it when they brought back Ray Langton, for example, didn't they? He was a 70s throwback.
That's true.
There's characters from the early days that still
I just really want.
It's a dwindling number.
I've got the taste of it now. I want more.
And this comes a year, 2 years, maybe it was only a year after Jed Stone had returned to Coronation Street as well, and
also
he was,
didn't know who that was.
Yeah, I didn't have an idea who he was as well, but he was another 60s throwback. But yeah, it didn't feel quite as special, I suppose, as the fact that it was somebody from episode 1. I don't know what those kids from the outside the cabin, outside the corner shop in the first scene of Coronation Street are doing now, because they could do it.
I thought they got run over.
So the quote on the Coronation Street website at the time when his return was announced said, "This is an interview from him." He said, "This is actually one of the reasons why I accepted the contract. Dennis is brought back into the show as a homeless person, and I thought, well, this is wonderful, because that gives me something to play, but it also gives the character somewhere to go, somewhere to develop." He also said, "I do hope that he becomes a comedy bad boy. I hope he becomes a real rogue. I certainly hope you can expect trouble from Dennis to come, and some fun scenes. I'm looking forward to it." Would you say comedy bad boy?
He was definitely cheeky. I wouldn't say he was a bad boy. I think he was more like a sort of hope you don't get mad about the thing I'm doing. You probably don't want me to do, boy.
He did some silly things that you might counsel against were you to know that he was going to do it. But
like buying loads of Christmas trees, or
he was the bad boy. Really was, like I said, what he came in as in the first episode, and they quickly swerved away from that. And
I just don't believe when you look at Philip Lowrie that you think he can really do anything that wrong, because he's so charming.
Such a charming chap. And I think, although I did like a lot of his comeback eventually, the 2011 onwards, the bits that I didn't like were when he was the bad boy. Like in his exit storyline, for example, one of the last things he did was punch Norris in the face. And another thing he did another time was selling one of Rita's rings, or was it Elsie's rings? I can't remember. And I just didn't like that. And going off with Gloria Price, I preferred the fun Dennis that we still got to see some of. I mean, one of my favourite scenes from his comeback was when he was bopping around the cabin with his lollipop, playing it like a guitar. And there's actually a scene in 60s Coronation Street where he's got a guitar and he's jumping around the room, and
it's a lollipop.
Like it's a lollipop. No, like it's a guitar, and I think it was supposed to mirror that scene. So that sort of stuff was the fun Dennis that I enjoyed the most. But you couldn't go straight into that, or they didn't choose to go straight into that, because the first story that he came into was this homeless story, and the back tale that we know since, was that by late 2010 the character was living rough. He'd fallen on hard times again following the breakdown of a relationship with some woman called Norma Fountain. He got involved with her around 2019, but he never really loved her. He just saw her as a meal ticket, really. But they ended up engaged. He jilted her on the day of the wedding, and now he's sleeping rough. So do you want to, we will do kind of this bit a bit chronologically, but do you want to take 2011 and remind us of what those first few months of Dennis looked like?
Well, he was discovered by Sophie Webster and Sian Powers, who were volunteering, being good Christian girls, helping at the soup kitchen that he visited.
He's a proper scruff bag, wasn't he, in those first scenes? He had a big stubbly beard, and he had a floppy homeless man's hat. I mean, like, if you think of what Stu was like when he was homeless, I think he was even more shabby than that.
So they invite him to Roy's Rolls for some dinner, and he gets full English on the house. And Sylvia's working there at the time. She's not happy about this.
She didn't like that, no.
So under cover of darkness, he returns to number 11, and he's spotted looking at the window frame where it's engraved Dennis Tanner was
Dennis
here.
Tanner, 1951. Yeah.
Rita comes along, thinks she recognises him, and he runs away.
I thought that was quite funny because it was dark. He looked so different. Rita hadn't seen him... for over 40 years.
I know there are people that I haven't seen for years that I recognise by how they move.
So the amount of time that Dennis was out of the show is longer than we've been alive.
Yeah,
Only just.
Yeah.
Can we just talk about this engraving for a minute? So this is on the windowsill of number 11, and I just love that it exists. It wasn't there on the original set. No. I don't know when it first appeared. We were chatting with the guys at Corriepedia the other day, and they said the first evidence they've got of it was in an episode in 1980, although I saw somebody on Reddit saying that it was there on a 1978 episode as well. But
maybe I don't remember when they moved sets quite a few times.
Back in the early days, because you had the interior studio set, then they went to the coldest place on earth set.
I don't think it was on that one.
No, and in a way I kind of, part of me wishes that it had been there from the beginning, because there's so little on the street now that you can say, the buildings themselves, but there's so little that you can say that's been there right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And this little carving, this tribute to a character, the fact that it's still there now is amazing, and I hope nobody ever gets rid of it. In real life, you probably would.
No, not necessarily. It's a
preservation
piece,
thing. Is it like our D-Day wall we've got in town?
Here? Unless you're changing the window.
Well, somebody might move into number 11, so I don't want that on my window. Just get rid of it. Sand it off. But Corrie can't, because it's such... And I was trying to think of what other things are there on the street that are long-lasting memorials to characters, and there's not much, is there?
There aren't.
You've got Maxine's bench. That's been there since 2003.
Maddie's Memorial.
Maddie's Memorial
Seb's
around the
Garden.
Ginnell, which you never see. Seb's Garden, I can't see that that's going to stay there forever. But there's not a whole lot else, is there?
I mean, no. I mean, there's the bench that's in Victoria Gardens is a tribute to people that weren't even in the show.
Yeah, to the Manchester bombing victims. And I think it would be stupid if there were too many. But so it's a very...
It's a very unique thing to have, yeah. I mean, no one else has got their... Apart from Maxine. Maxine's got her name on the bench. Dennis Tanner's got his name.
Yeah, well, Maddie's mural says Maddie as well, but it's round the back, and you literally never see that. So the thing with the Dennis's carving is you'd never know it was there either, would you? It's not like they zoom in on it every now and then, but it's just lovely that it's a little thing, a little memento of this character. And I did like how they played into it when he had his comeback and had him, the first thing he does on the street is going to see it and run his finger in it, and then when he leaves in 2014, his final scene is looking at this carving. Julie's standing there and he's kind of recounting the story of when he carved it. Obviously, it is a bit of a retcon if he says it was carved in 1951, but it clearly wasn't there on the set in 1960.
It's definitely a Dennis thing to have written 1951 when it wasn't 1951.
Well, he said that it was a rainy day and his mum called him. He was standing on the porch and was calling him inside for his tea. It's just brilliant. I love it. And got a few photos of it over the years.
Yeah, so he was telling Julie about this, and obviously she's his long lost relative.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was nice.
It was nice.
So he hears from Sophie the next day that...
Are we back to 2011
well,
now?
What do you want me to do?
Yeah, no, this is right.
So he's going to go to the homeless shelter. Rita goes along and waits for him. He runs off again, but then he comes back a few scenes later and they have a little catch up. And we hear about the fact that Elsie and Bill have died.
Yeah, Bill
Portugal.
Gregory was Elsie, the fella that she ran off with in 1984.
Her final love.
Yeah, he was in it in the early 60s, wasn't he? And then he came back 20 years later to whisk her away to Portugal. That's a really lovely scene. These two characters who knew each other ish. This is the thing, that the Rita's appearances with Dennis are few and far between pre-2011. In fact, they were only in one episode together. It was one episode in 1964 when Rita comes into the Rovers, sees Dennis, and they clearly know each other. This wasn't like a chance encounter. We were supposed to have believed that they knew each other from the clubs.
Well, yeah, because she was a showbiz guy.
And she was a singer and exotic dancer. And can you imagine Rita as an exotic dancer these days? And then they ended up going back to his house. Elsie was away at the time. She was I can't remember where she was actually, but Rita stayed the night in Elsie's bed, and Dennis was in his bed, so there was nothing romantic there between them. They were just friends, and that was it.
Pals?
They were pals, exactly. And so even though we didn't see the extent of their friendship back then, we were supposed to believe that they had something more, and which is why it was such a lovely reunion for them come 2011. Not, of course, that it meant anything to us when we were watching it.
No, so Rita knows that Dennis has fallen on hard times, so she asks if he would like to stay on the sofa in her flat, and he does. Gets himself a bit of a wash and a shave, and he goes for his first drink in the Rovers in over 40 years. He catches up with Ken and Emily, who were obviously in the show when he was, and he gets introduced to Norris, who is not very impressed.
For the whole of the time that Dennis is on the show, there was this little... It kind of was a rivalry.
He was jealous.
Because Norris was somewhat romantically interested in Rita, wasn't he? He proposed to her at least once. But I think that just anybody who took time away from Rita didn't really...
Well, he just didn't want anyone muscling in.
No, and Norris is and Norris is such a stick in the mud and such a rule follower and a stickler to the rules.
Opposite.
Yeah, they were very much opposites to Dennis, and he didn't like that at all. But having Ken and Emily catch up with them was lovely, because on that episode where Rita is staying over at Dennis's, Emily does come into the house at one point and sees Emily there in a night. Emily comes in and sees Rita there, in a nightgown, and then kind of rushes off. So it was...
What, to say everyone there sleeping together?
No, just she kind of rushes off going, "Oh, goodness me, sorry." She probably didn't say anything.
Who was in the nightgown?
Rita.
In her own house?
No, in Dennis's house.
Oh, I didn't understand what you meant.
So that's exactly what I meant. So they talked a little bit about that. Here's another.
When did they know where Dennis's house was? Do you mean back at the time?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, I get you now. Sorry.
You. No, it's all right. I'm sure he said a lot of things that people don't.
No, I didn't get what you meant. I thought you were still talking about 2011.
But of course, we are the experts of this, aren't we?
Right. I just didn't know what you were talking about. Julie hears that Elsie's maiden name was Grimshaw, and she's like, "That Grimshaw? Let me do some investigation." And she finds out that they share an ancestor with Dennis, her and Eileen, and it's Arnley Grimshaw, who was a cousin of her and Eileen's father, and Elsie's cousin, so that makes Julie and Eileen long lost nieces of Dennis.
A bit, not necessary to do, but it's a bit like Gail and...
Well, it's any time a character comes in the show who has a surname to somebody else that's in the show, like with Lisa Swain now, everyone's like, "Oh, Arnold Swain." Like, there's got to be a link just because it's fiction, and that's what people like, patterns. And
I think it's the fact that Eileen's living in exactly the same house that Elsie and Dennis were 40 years beforehand, so it's a funny little link to make. And I think over the time he was in the show, they made a little bit of it. But they're certainly more than they've made of George and Gail having a fanny in common back from 100 years ago, I'll tell you that.
So by the end of July, Dennis is doing some charity work with Emily, and she's pretty pleased about this. Then in November, the Roof and Refuge charity that Dennis is relying on, it turns out to be a money-making scam. I don't know what, I can't remember about that, but Norris contacts the Gazette, tells them about Dennis's history with homelessness, and Dennis is not very happy about this because he doesn't want anyone poking about.
Yes.
But because this article gets put into the paper, his ex-fiancée Norma Fountain turns up at the cabin. Dennis does a runner. Then he comes back and confronts her in the Rovers, and they go through their relationship. She says that, I knew you never loved me, I just wanted companionship. And Rita realises that Dennis is worried that the same thing's going to happen between them and he's going to run off again. But she says, look, I don't mind just being friends. We don't have to do any romance here. You don't have to pretend you like me.
It's kind of interesting that they had Dennis having this relationship with Norma, and the fact that he jilted her and he didn't really love her. Because if you know, when we go back and have a look at his previous romantic history, he never really stayed with the same woman for too long, did he? He doesn't feel like the settle downish type.
Okay.
So 2012 came along, and Dennis accepted a job at a DIY shop in Birmingham because Norris said, you've been leeching off Rita for too long. What are you doing? You're staying with her.
Just imagine
Stop spending all her money.
This Birmingham DIY shop going, or we need to reach out. Our recruitment's not bringing in the top talent. We've got to go further afield.
I know. Got to recruit the homeless drive going on here. So Rita finds this out. She's gutted because she's actually has fallen for Dennis on a very short period of time. But unbeknownst to her, Dennis has also developed feelings for her. But they're both too embarrassed to tell each other, both too shy. So Dennis says his goodbyes, starts to head down to Birmingham. But by the end of the episode, they're confessing their love for one another, and Dennis proposes. So it really was a whirlwind romance here between Dennis and Rita, wasn't it? Literally
Beautiful.
Months between their first encounter in over 40 years, and now he's gone down on one knee. I thought it was sweet. Lots of people I read at the time just didn't get on with those two as a couple. Did you enjoy
Rita
them?
and
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that I bought it that much. But in hindsight, I think it makes more sense.
I think it's maybe the opposite for me. I think I enjoyed it more at the time. And when we did our original character profile of Dennis, this was just after he left. We were both saying, they're quite sweet together. I just like the idea that it was a drama. No, it was kind of drama free, but it was a kind of it wasn't a sexy snoggy kind of relationship, was it? It was just two old people finding companionship in their later years in life.
Yeah.
And
see, this is the trouble. Okay, I don't like the kissing scenes, and I don't like the shagging scenes, and I find them very boring and samey. And I know loads of people love them, but this is why I like the older romances, because they never really do that with them because they're scared of freaking people out. I think. But yeah, you don't have like lingering bedroom looks and waking up with the old L-shaped blanket in the bed.
No.
With older couples, there's just actual romance, because I think sometimes soaps are bad and
they skip straight to the
they're bad.
Pumpy,
they're bad at building romance, and they just use snogging as a shorthand for all of the lovely little touches that we actually want to see in a relationship that's just beginning. But they do
Not
that.
always, but sometimes.
All right, they do that better with older couples because they can't use the good easy shorthand of they've woken up in bed.
Yeah, for sure.
Because everyone's scared of old people having sex with each other.
I mean, I get what some people were saying at the time, which was that Dennis was such a free spirit and he still had so much life and vim and vigour and fun in him, and by this time Rita was starting to wind down a little bit and just become kind of the little old lady character that she is today.
I think there's spark in her, yeah.
There is spark in her, but the Rita of 2025, and I guess the Rita of 2010 as well, it was certainly a far cry away from the Rita we had in 1960s, 1970s, and so there was a bit of compatibility mismatch there, but I was certainly willing to give this a shot because, like you said, they just did it so sweetly. I thought stag night comes in June. Norris spots that Dennis is being a bit shady on his phone. He's actually texting his ex Norma. So Norris follows Dennis back to the flat, sees him letting her in, and then Norris gate crashes Rita's hen night and says Dennis is seeing his ex in secret. But it turns out he was just comforting her because her son's been seriously injured in a car accident. So Dennis is doing nothing wrong here. But Rita is left wondering whether she can really trust him. Do you remember much about their wedding when Rita got kidnapped? Because it's one of those things in Coronation Street that, like, I know happened, but I barely remember it.
Yeah, I don't remember this at all. So many people have been kidnapped and put in a boot of a car.
I don't know. I think she probably got the backseat treatment at least, but I'm going to say it's a bit unnecessary drama, and there's always has to be some sort of extra drama on top of the wedding. God forbid they just have a lovely wedding together. But yeah, I would have liked as a romantic relationship for them just to get married, really. But it was because Rita was so closely linked to Tina McIntyre, wasn't she? Tina was a bit of a surrogate daughter for her back then, and she was all tied up with loan sharks, Rick Neelan. I think this was in the wake of Terry Duckworth's departure from the street, where he left Tommy Duckworth with a load of debt. It was a bit of a mess, but to cut a long story short, Rita got kidnapped by Rick Neelan on the day of her wedding, until he got a load of money, and she then was able to be let out and they got married. So yeah, unnecessary, I'm going to say, but I don't remember it brilliantly well. I didn't leave that much of a lasting impression on me. Then you got what I'm going to say is Dennis's most bizarre story of his comeback, but it probably wouldn't have felt out of the ordinary back in the 60s. It was the whole Lollipop Man saga. You remember that one?
I do.
And this was Dennis getting a job as a Lollipop Man to help children cross the road.
Oh yeah, but they call them crossing guards in other countries.
Yeah.
We call them lollipop people because
I like our name better.
We're a whimsical country.
No, I'm not going to lie. We beat you hands down with that.
Yeah,
but anyway, it's because he feels guilty about sponging off Rita still, so he decides to get a job. And then this gets him into a feud with Steve McDonald's because Steve's making fun of him. Dennis blocks the road outside of streetcars, not letting him get his taxi out. And then the whole thing ends, basically, with a whole street's worth of lollipop men. There were like 20 or 30 lollipop men marching down the road, blocking it, stopping any streetcars, taxis from coming in or out. And then they make up. It was peculiar. And I remember, I think we might have given that the Bobbins Award that year in the Conversation Street Awards.
Why did I hate it?
I think...
How dare I?
But that is the sort of story that I'm going to say they don't do anymore. You know?
Can't afford it.
I can't imagine a world these days where anything along those lines, which is just a couple of, 2-week long little bit of whimsy where the Lollipop Men army turn up outside of streetcars. It's all got to be a story,
They're
hasn't it?
Well, I like your idea for this Lollipop Man invasion, but which one of them has terminal cancer?
Yeah, exactly.
And do they have any kind of issues-based problems that we might be able to sort out, like racism or prejudice or bigotry or something, anything like that?
Yeah, well...
If not, no.
But it was suitable, I suppose, for a character of his age, because they couldn't give him the big soap mag selling story, I suppose. And why not this? Because he is a bit of a fun character after all. So, 2013, Gemma, what's he getting up to here?
Well, Rita and Dennis in the background a bit more.
Yeah.
Because there's only a few bits and bobs here, like Dennis being a bit useless, giving Rita secondhand roses. The hash brownie incident at the cafe was another little bit of colour that they gave them. He's still feuding with Norris.
Yeah, the hash that was Sylvia as well, wasn't it? They got involved with that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the story behind it. Somebody gave Sylvia a recipe that included cannabis or something like that, and I can't remember whether Dennis even had any of it, but he was involved and it was kind of fun. And I think as a child of the 60s, and it was quite fitting, I suppose.
They never did drugs in Coronation Street in the 60s.
No, they did have some hippies though, didn't they?
Not in front of the camera anyway. So, Dennis finds out that Emily is going to leave Norris her house, and he doesn't like that either.
No, what a rivalry.
So, by the end of the year, there's a bit of a strain in Dennis and Rita's marriage. He does not like how involved Rita's getting in Tina's life. It's too dramatic.
Too full of shady
You can
characters.
see it ends in badly.
Yeah, definitely.
He gets a tax bill for £512, so he sells Rita's ring at Barlow's Buys. Thinks he's going to buy it back when he can afford it. He does buy it back the next day, but it costs £150 more than when he sold it.
Yeah, Rob put a bit of a markup there.
And Rita finds out she's not very happy about this.
And I seem to remember watching that thinking, oh no, Dennis, don't do it. That's a bad move. And this is like I was saying earlier, him turning into a bit more of a bad boy.
Yeah,
no, that's not a criminal act, is it? But it's like, oh, don't do that. I suppose that's a similar along the lines of when I used to say about Daisy, like, oh, don't do that, Daisy. I want you to be perfect and only do the right thing. But I suppose it does. I can see the old Dennis doing something like that.
Yeah, exactly. He hasn't learned.
No.
So Rita finds out she's not happy about it. Then there's an old song playing on the radio. Like you said, he plays his lollipop like it is a guitar. And so Dennis gets the showbiz bug again, and he starts talking with Gloria Price about the variety acts of days gone by.
But Gloria Price was the mother of Stella Price, the landlady of the Rover's Return, and she was the very glamorous granny of the street, wasn't she?
Yep, Eva's grandma.
Yes.
Dennis gets in touch with his old mate Richie DeVries, who's an old rocker from the 60s, whose band is apparently very popular over in the States in Alabama.
Albania. No,
No,
Albania.
hang on. I thought I said Alabama.
No. I didn't like Richie's character. I think it was Richie's DeVries it was pronounced. And yeah, he was definitely an ageing rocker kind of person, wasn't he? And that whole story, I mean, it was the beginning of the end for Dennis, sadly. And although it was kind of fun that he was getting back into showbiz, and you get these people saying, oh, I've still got it, but it didn't work for me, and it just meant more lies and shady business and not being honest to Rita, and yeah, this is when the character started to go downhill for me, and I think we knew by this point that he was on his way out as well.
Dennis and Richie plan a gig in the bistro along with Gloria. Rita is not happy about this. Everyone loves it though. I guess the Albanians are right about something. Dennis and Gloria decide to work together to promote local bands more often because they think that they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, in some ways, Dennis and Gloria did make a good couple. And I've seen some people saying, well, this is who they should have paired him up with originally. But I can see the temptation of putting him with Rita was too much to resist,
can't you? Gloria just eggs him on.
Yeah.
It's not funny then. This is what soap relationships have to have conflict in them, otherwise they're not going to be on screen. That's the only storyline that Coronation Street and soaps can do a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think
with the couples.
One of the things I would say about Dennis is that he kind of needed somewhat of a mother figure in his life, because he was living with his mum, through to his mid-20s, and he was a bit of a mummy's boy, wasn't he? And I get the impression that he just, rather than wanting just romance, he was looking for somebody to darn his socks and make his tea for him. And I think that he got that in Rita, and there was that level of homeliness and comfort that he'd been missing all the time that he was living on the street. And I don't think that Gloria would have given him that.
I mean, I wouldn't have said Rita or Gloria are particularly domestically inclined, but you could say the same about Elsie.
Yeah, totally. But I see that
all three of these women are incredibly glamorous, and I think that if you're going to say that he's searching for something from, his youth, that idea of a glamorous, powerful woman is certainly something he'd seen in his mum.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe Gloria had a bit more of that about her than Rita did at that age, because Rita had long since matured. Yeah,
I mean, Rita and Elsie were rivals for quite a while, weren't they? And that's another thing that people have said, I don't think Rita would have wanted to marry the son of her once rival Elsie.
Well, it's like Mike and Ken.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Rita and Elsie were rivals over Len, so there's definitely some kind of age difference thing going on there. But I didn't mind that at all particularly. Anyway, so Richie then, he starts getting close to Gloria himself, which Dennis doesn't like. He even tries the greased back hair, leather jacket look one evening just to try and impress Gloria. It doesn't go down so well, let's just put it that way. Then you got Rita getting in on the act here and saying, what are you doing spending all this time with my husband? She accuses her of being a cheap money grabber. Dennis says, Rita, you're just jealous of a woman 10 years younger than you. And basically, that's it. Dennis and Rita, less than a year married, over. Is that right? Yeah. Less than a year married. Terrible. And this... It didn't need to happen.
Don't tell Debbie about it. She'd be thrilled.
Didn't need to happen
40%
because... 40%
of all marriages end in divorce. It's time for a party.
Stuart Blackburn did not need to do this. It was... You know, they were cut down before their prime, I'm going to say, this relationship. So after Richie leaves Weatherfield to work in Europe, Gloria decides that she's also done with Weatherfield, and she gets into her convertible one evening and says, I'm off travelling, come with me to Dennis. And because he feels like
come with me to Dennis, we're leaving now.
Because he thinks that there's nothing left for him here because Rita's dumped him, he hops into the convertible, they drive down the road, Rita's just coming out. Hated this scene. Bloody hell, I hated this scene. Rita's coming out of the pub and Dennis is like, bye Rita, sorry, love you. No, I didn't say that. He said, like, bye, look after yourself or something. And that was it. And that was his first exit. He did get a second chance, but stone me if he didn't blow that as well. But I don't remember ever being quite so fuming and livid at a scene of Coronation Street as I was with Dennis going off with Gloria.
I remember how mad you are, and it kind of makes me remember this with fondness.
I did. Yeah, I think I'm the same. You know, we're over 10 years on from this now, and it's like, oh, that was a really special scene for me because it made me really, really mad.
Yeah.
Because just seeing him go off with Gloria, this hussy, the way that he was so callous to Rita as he drove past, there was no kind of look of regret. It was just like, bye, sucker.
That was the thing. He was like literally not bothered in the slightest about this woman who'd saved him from homelessness.
Yeah.
And kind of turned his life around.
And it didn't feel in character, because say what you like about Dennis, and you know sometimes he does the wrong thing, he always had a good heart in him.
You'd think he was loyal in some sense.
Yeah, you would. And you know, not all of his other romantic relationships ended well, and some of them was him desperately trying to shake certain women off of him. But Rita deserved better than this.
They could have saved this and still had this scene if only they'd had him try to say something to Rita first. Like if they had a little scene where he'd been like, listen Rita, I know we've had a good run and everything, but I can't stay with you, I'm really sorry love, you know, I mean I really did love you. And then she was like, no, get bent. And so then he drives off with a convertible going, see you later bitch. That would have worked.
It was a massive
sometimes it feels like
of an exit
they just get an idea of a visual of something that they think will look good in a clip show, and then everything kind of has to arrange itself around that. Like, because that visual of him in the convertible sailing off, like, bye, see you later suckers, that was a very strong image, isn't it?
Not for me.
No, it is a strong image for you.
I know what you mean. Well, anyway, he comes back a couple of months later because with his tail in his legs, between his legs. That's the preposition I'm looking for. He's living rough again in Weatherfield. Gloria, the relationship there, has already broken down, and Rita comes to visit him in hospital one day because he's been beaten up while sleeping in a doorway. He tries to turn on the charms, but she's not interested. Too much water's gone under the bridge here. Don't wash with her. And she says, look, you can come back to mine. You can stay with me for a little while, but no way am I taking you back. Not after how you treated me. Good on you, Rita. But at the time I was like, oh gosh, Rita, take him back. I mean, I knew because I knew that Philip Lowrie, his exit had been announced in the programme. I knew that it couldn't possibly work. But despite that, I was just willing for them to have got back together again, but it didn't go there, yeah. He eventually moves in with niece Julie, long lost niece Julie. He's determined to make things right with Rita.
Julie and Dennis are in heaven together now.
They are, aren't they? Yeah, having a bit of a gossip together.
Reunion.
Yeah, exactly. Along with Bruno Langley Todd. He's like, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on here?
Oh my god.
Fortunately for him, like, Rita gets killed around this time. So
Rita gets killed?
Tina gets killed.
Sorry.
Listen carefully. And she needs a shoulder to cry on. And Dennis is like, hello. But he's like, so no, I'm still not interested. I'm not getting back with you. And his last ditch attempt of trying to get back together as Rita was him and Julie concocted this plan whereby Julie would pretend to throw him out of the flat in front of Rita so that Rita would take pity on him. Rita's like, nah, this is just a scam. I'm fuming. Get out of my life. Next day is Dennis's final episode, I think. He goes to the cabin, gets wound up more by Norris, who's just like, what are you doing here? You told you you're a scammer, told you you're a gold digger, you've just been and proved it. Norris gets a punch in the face from Dennis. Dennis then takes money out of the till. I'm just watching it going, what are you doing to this character?
I know what you're saying, and I can see why I probably was mad too, but on reflection, as part of this character's story, this just makes absolute sense to me.
What? Dennis never punched anybody. He's not a fighter.
He's a lover, but he's passionate.
He would
sometimes love turns to hate, Michael.
And yeah, they had him, and then they had him stealing out of the till. And I know back in the day, he was sent to prison in his youth for being a teenage scally. So is it in the blood? Is it instinct for him? But they really just did a massive number on Dennis when they get rid of him.
When I see an open till, I do get nervous and my fingers itch.
So anyway, he gets caught. He gets caught out by Rita. He takes one last look at his carving, as we said, and off he goes into the sunset. And the next year he gets in touch with Rita, wanting a divorce. They do. Rita's still Rita Tanner to this day, isn't she? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because you get some characters. Is it similar like who am I thinking of? Yasmin. She never became Yasmin Nazir again, or indeed whatever her maiden name was, despite the fact that Jeff Metcalf was an absolute monster to her. She still was.
Well, I told you, I've got that friend who was married, and I thought that she would go back to her maiden name, and she said, no, I earned this name.
Well, I
think if anyone's earned the surname, Rita earned Tanner by having to put up with him being a bit of a silly git.
It's kind of fun to know that there's still a Tanner in the street. One of the original families is still there, for what it's worth. Do you think
it's kind of also a bit of a triumph of Elsie here? Because her name lives on, even though it's not even her original name.
Well, yeah.
It lives on with Rita, even though Rita would have rather probably killed herself.
The thing is, if
be anything to do with Elsie.
I suppose if Rita had changed her name, what would she change it back to? Would she go back to Sullivan? Would she go back to Fairclough? Would she go back to Littlewood? Would she go back to Bates? It just goes on and on.
She get in the TARDIS and keep going until she finds
one she likes the best. I don't know, but that's the end of Dennis, apart from the very, very, very end, which we will return to at the end of this episode. But I've just got a quote here from Stuart Blackburn, producer at the time, who said, trying to justify why this course was deemed necessary for Dennis. Yeah. He said, sometimes writers come up with stories that we want to run with. In this case, we wanted to see the Dennis Tanner of old again. He was always a bit of a liar, a bit of a rogue, and a bit of a cheat, so we wanted to see the naughty Dennis.
Yeah, naughty.
And once we begin to bring the rogue back, it had to have consequences. It didn't feel right to tell a story where he was so badly behaved and then everything carried on as normal. I'm sorry,
my God,
no.
Stuart, because now you don't... Well, you're arguing for...
I know.
No consequences, which is where everything goes wrong in modern
I know you
Corrie.
always want consequences, but the thing is...
What I mean is, you don't have to put your characters in the situation where the consequences are so dire that you can't bring yourself to actually go through with them. You don't have to raise the stakes every time. You could just have something where the consequences are given out and they're not life-changingly awful.
With this kind of character, the type of Jack the Lad, cheeky chappy that Dennis Tanner was, the consequences, he gets his ear twisted by his mum, or the consequences, he finishes a scene where he's going, in front of the camera. Yeah, or he
makes him sleep on the sofa.
Yeah, or he gets a newspaper clapped round the back of his head. It didn't need to be the consequence he left, and
then he gets run over.
It was really not a great end for him, unfortunately. But I was still left with the feeling of there's something about this character. I really like him. I hope one day we'll get to see what he was like. And I can't remember whether we saw much beforehand of people saying, no, he really is brilliant. Because we had that with people like Albert Tatlock. People were telling us he's an absolute gem of a character. And I didn't particularly find that in the end. I'm not a huge Albert Tatlock fan. But there are some characters that we didn't go into the 60s episodes when we then watched them during COVID thinking, well, we better watch out for this one.
Yeah, can't wait for this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's like, Ina, we knew that she was good and we'd seen a few more clips of her, and you kind of go in there thinking, oh, brilliant, we're going into the era of Ina, we're going into the era of Annie, we're going into the era of Elsie. But with people like Christine Hardman, Dennis Tanner, Minnie Caldwell even, it was very much a blank slate, wasn't it? But Dennis Tanner, very early on, just grabbed us and wouldn't let us go.
Yeah, I think I might have been a bit sceptical about how good old Corrie could really have been. Because I think, like I said about the nostalgia and the rose-tinted glasses and stuff, and thinking, is this just a bit like Shakespeare where everyone tells you that it was good, but when you actually try to watch it, it's kind of boring? Even though I am a massive fan of Shakespeare, but I'm just saying, like, on the whole, most people aren't really that into it. Is it kind of like that where people say it because they think it's what you're supposed to say, and it's definitely not that. Coronation Street, like vintage Coronation Street, is not just a waffly historian kind of nonsense blowing smoke up someone's arse to try to make you think you're an intellectual. It is really good.
Yeah,
it's very, very good to watch the old episodes, and Dennis Tanner was a massive part of that.
Yeah. Tony Warren originally envisioned Dennis as, like we said earlier, the bad boy of the show, the contrast to Ken, because you got Ken being the intellectual, the morally superior in all circumstances, and doesn't he just know it sort of character. And then you got the bad boy. The clash there is obvious. The family at number 3 versus the family at number 11. But and Tony Warren said, in those streets there's always a bad un, a wrong un, and he was the wrong un. But they very soon, after filming a few episodes, realised that taking him more down the comedy route would be the way to go. And Harry Kershaw, who was a script editor, later producer of the show, said that, we changed course, excused his previous lapses on the grounds that he was weak and easily led, and turned him into a zany, head-in-the-sky kid, thirsting after a career in showbiz. And Tony Warren, on the other hand, though, did lament the missed opportunities and said, well, there are infinite possibilities in Dennis that were never explored, the criminal side. And he kind of always wished that they could have gone down that route. But I'm definitely with Harry Kershaw here, saying they 100% made the right choice with where they took him.
Well, Tony Warren at one point thought about casting himself as Dennis.
I know.
But I also think he wanted to be Ken as well. And in a sense, I do think...
Tony Warren, I think if Tony Warren could have made the programme where he played all the characters in various costumes, he probably would have done it. Because he knew those characters inside out, because they'd been living in his head for all these years. Yeah. And he knew exactly how they needed to be played. And somebody external coming in and taking on the role of Elsie or Dennis or whoever is not often going to match exactly with what you've been envisioning all these years.
But it's interesting because Ken and Dennis were sort of two sides of a coin, weren't they? There's these two very young male characters, and one of them had his head in the air. He was fixed on greater things, and Dennis was just like a bumbling along trying to make the best of what he was doing. He had aspirations, but they seemed to be comically out of reach.
Yeah.
I really like them. It kind of, I weirdly, I think that somebody like Dennis could work super well alongside Daniel now, because Daniel's just a Ken. And I don't really think there was ever much conflict between Dennis and Ken.
I can't remember.
I don't think there was like that. But it feels very obvious that they were polar opposites.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah. So, to shake things up a bit for this kind of character profile / tribute, we're not going to be going through all of his scenes or stories chronologically now. I thought it'd be fun just to kind of categorise things a little bit more. And there's so much here that we still haven't seen. I think this is one of the things that's most exciting to me as a Coronation Street and Dennis Tanner fan, knowing that there's still a couple of hundred of episodes out there that we haven't seen. Does that...
Well, probably more than that, because...
He's done 600 odd episodes in total, couple of hundred of those were from the comeback.
Okay.
We've seen some of it. But in any case, there's still so much Dennis material out there that we have yet to watch. And I know some of it isn't available. And I pray for the day when Corrie does put the whole lot of it on ITVX to stream. But, there's still some that's available that we can watch. It's very, very exciting. But anyway...
I'll tell you what, Corrie, if you would like me to go through and be... What are they called? Where you kind of like not censorship, but like,
a snipper.
Not a snipper, but just like, oh, you could put a warning in front of that. I could do that.
The PC police.
Yeah, I could be the PC police.
These contain upsetting scenes. Stick a label on it. Yeah. Language of the time.
May contain attitudes and language that is no longer appropriate in our modern era.
There was a bit of that in early Coronation Street, that's true. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about are some of it we have seen, other bits we haven't seen, and we're just going to say from what we've read what we're looking forward to. But if we kind of start off, I think it's quite suitable to talk about his backstory, pre-Coronation Street. And he had a bit of a tragic upbringing. It was back in the mid 20th century. I think if you didn't have a tragic upbringing, you were doing something wrong, because everyone had hard times, didn't they? Especially up north where it were proper grim. But Dennis was born at number 11 Coronation Street.
Oh,
I just love the idea. I wasn't Ken. I think he was born at number 3 Coronation Street, or maybe even number 1. I can't remember.
Well, anyone who wasn't born on the street can get lost.
I love it that he was born there, and we got to see him come back all these years later. But anyway, it was during the Second World War, obviously, in the 1940s. Although I don't know whether that counts as his de-aged or post, or it doesn't matter. These days, he was born in the Second World War. Younger brother of Linda Tanner, and his conception was through. It wasn't the prettiest. Arnold Tanner came home from the war once, found Elsie in bed with a Polish soldier, and he raped her. So, and Dennis Tanner came of that. So Arnold, not the nicest chap. He disappear a little bit on early Coronation Street, doesn't he? He comes into it in early 61.
A divorce.
For sure. So not pleasant.
Yeah, she said that she didn't like him.
Yeah, absolutely. But finding her in bed with a soldier, I mean, you'd say, well, what's the chances of that? But actually, you probably had more likely to find her in bed with a soldier during the war than having an empty bed.
From what I hear from Ina Sharples.
Liberty Hall, I tell you. Elsie tried to have an abortion. She did not want a child from this, from this monster of a father, but it failed, and so she just kind of went through with a pregnancy because he clearly wanted to live so badly.
That was
a quote from
go
somewhere.
Down like that now.
What do you mean?
Well, we're not going to get into it. It's
not going into abortion. Thank goodness it didn't work. Arnold did come back again in 1946, but didn't last very long. He walked out within weeks, left her to raise the kids herself, along with the numerous boyfriends as well. Although I suppose a lot of them had no intention of raising these kids. They were just more interested in the mum. But because of partly due to a lack of stability in his home life, no father figure. Dennis grew up to be quite the tearaway, and Elsie tried to hold things together herself, but she was working as well, and so he just was a bit of an oik, bit of an urchin, wasn't he, young Dennis? One incident when he was a teenager saw him raiding an office safe in Rosamond Street along with a gang of boys. Then when he got caught with the money hidden in a coal hole at number 11, he ended up in Borstal, which is basically the STC of...
Is it?
The Borstal was the precursor to where Daniel is working now. It was just where the young criminals went to. The children who were in court arrested, too young to go to big boy prison.
I always thought Borstal was a specific place, like Bedlam.
No, it was just the prison system for youths that lasted until the early 80s.
Why do you know all this?
I did a little bit of research over the weekend, actually.
Nice.
Don't ask me any more questions.
I always thought it sounded also like a delicious beef drink.
That's Bovril, darling.
Okay.
Anyway, so he was in Borstal, probably doing, if it was anything like the STC these days.
Writing poems about his feelings.
Yeah. No, I think it was... I can't remember.
Back in the day, they would have beaten him with sticks, probably.
There's probably a little bit of that.
Yeah.
No, it was a correctional facility. It was trying to rehabilitate the youths, even back then, rather than just punish them until their time was up.
Did it work?
Well, not really, because after his release, he still continued to make sensible choices, let's say, when it came to his friends. And in mid-1960...
Do you mean not sensible at all? Was that sarcasm? He struggled to make sensible choices.
Did I say continued to? He struggled to make sensible choices with his friends. And in 1960, midway through the year, he and his old mucker, Jed Stone, were caught breaking into a newsagent's, and Dennis was imprisoned for 6 months.
Tell you what, Dennis would have loved Twitter because he wouldn't have to break into a newsagent's to find out what was going on.
This is true.
Just look on your phone.
This is very true. I don't think he went in there to find out what's been going on in the news, I'll tell you that. So, and this is the Dennis that we meet in the first episode of Coronation Street, where he's struggling to get a job because of his criminal past.
Let me talk about his family.
Well, we did talk about his family. It's going to be the first category. So go on.
Right.
How did you enjoy the family Tanner?
Well, in the first sort of few episodes of Coronation Street in 1960, we find out that there's a strained relationship with he and his mum, and he's also bickering with Linda. I think he's a bit jealous of Linda because she matures, she's got a husband, she has a baby, and she moves to Canada, and she seems like she's being quite successful.
Yeah, you're right. She was. I think
she's mature, and he was not.
Yeah, and she was a few years older than him, but for sure he is kind of. I probably feels it, and it probably is the case that he's looked down on him like, where did I go wrong with you kind of character, and it was a really brilliant setup like that in that first episode where Elsie's having a go at him for stealing out of her purse, and Linda's just above it all, isn't she? When are you going to grow up, Dennis?
I'm really fascinated with family dynamics and how much of your personality is kind of shaped by your siblings and your even things like birth order and stuff like that. Because being the younger boy out of an older sister, is a different kind of thing to being an older brother and a younger sister, I think. Because there's this calming, mature presence. Like, it's the stereotype, obviously, but like the older sister is always going to be a bit more of a stabilising, kind of mature person. But then when you have an older brother, you probably feel like you're more protected. I don't know. It's interesting. But anyway, he's...
Oh, go on. I was just going to say, I don't remember that we've seen a whole lot of the three of them together.
Not really,
because Ivan, her husband, is in it a bit, and then they move to number 9, don't they? And then they move away to Canada.
Yes,
I think.
Yes.
So we don't get to see a whole load of that dynamic, but whenever she did come back, it always did feel like, God, what did I do so right with this child that I didn't do with you, Dennis?
I also get the impression that, I know this is not about Linda, but Linda always feels like when she came home to the Tanners, it's like she regressed slightly. Like, she goes to Canada and she's, someone different there, and she's mature and important, and she's, making a new life for herself. When she comes home, she's right back into squabbling with her brother and nagging at her mum and being told to do this, that and the other thing, and kind of turn back into a child a little bit. Yeah,
but it was really, the family dynamic at number 11 for the vast majority of those early years was Elsie and Dennis.
Yeah, and her being like, for God's sake.
What a brilliant mother-son relationship that was.
Really great.
Because
It's a bit like Gail and David, except without the psychotic violence.
It is, isn't it? Just the weary mother, what on earth have you done this time? Yeah, and David certainly was mothered in many ways, over-mothered. And then Todd and Eileen as well. Similar, but Todd did go off the rails, but he had a bit more of a head on his shoulders.
Incorrigible sons and their world-weary mothers.
Yeah, because Corrie has so often been about the henpecked husband and the wife nagging, but this is just a different take on that, isn't it?
Tell you what would be a really good...
Get yourself down to the job office, get yourself a job, and he's like, I can't because people know my criminal record.
Yeah. What would be a really good bonus episode would be, which is worse on Corrie, a daughter or a son? How much misery do they cause? And I'm going to say it's the sons. I don't think that the daughters are that bad.
Not in the whole. But
Dennis is pinching money from his mum's purse. He's having troubles trying to find a job.
Yeah, he kind of gets involved a little bit in her love life as well, slightly, because she's...
her and Len are kind of on... They're kind of like, will they, won't they? They're kind of like the Ross... I called them the Ross and Rachel of Coronation Street. I don't know enough about really how much they got together or not.
No, it's still a bit of a blank for us from our experience watching.
But a lot of people, I think, a lot of people kind of viewed, if you were going to say who's the main character, I think Elsie and Len were pretty big names on Corrie that were single for a lot of the time.
Yeah, but he does propose to her in 1963, doesn't he? And Dennis isn't happy at first, although then he encourages her to accept. But they never properly got together.
Because Len has obviously his wife Nellie, and then she's never in it.
No, we never saw her face,
ever.
Did we? She leaves him
and
around the year 62.
Doesn't like him at all.
Yeah,
and he doesn't like her, and so to all intents and purposes, he kind of like at any point could have got together with Elsie. They obviously fancied each other.
I almost think that maybe Dennis is the sort of person that didn't like the idea of his mum being in a relationship with anybody.
Yeah.
Because he wanted her attention. He wanted her to darn his socks, not somebody else's.
No.
He kind of relied on her to look after him, and because he wasn't mature or grown up enough to do it himself. He wanted her to be happy, and they definitely bickered a lot of the time, but they still had a very warm and loving relationship, and they were very loyal to each other, weren't they?
Yeah. Dennis rescues Sheila Birtles from suicide attempt.
Nothing to do with the family,
but it's a bit of interesting, showing his other side, I guess.
Yeah, bit of trivia for you.
In 1964, Elsie turns 41, but Dennis gives her a cake with 48 candles on it. What a card. He finds out that year that Elsie is working as a model for art students in an art school, and he's super embarrassed about this. And it gets really dramatic because the teacher who works there, who's called David, gets infatuated with Elsie, and he traps her in number 11 with his gun. And then he runs away, and Dennis has to comfort her. Yeah.
I think when we talk about those two as a loving mother-son relationship, one of my favourite scenes is on his wedding episode, right towards the end, when he's marrying Jenny Sutton, and he's all excited, and he comes to see her in the bed, and they have this lovely speech.
He wakes her up like it's Christmas morning.
Yeah, you made the comparison between David and Gail earlier, and that made me think of this lovely speech that David gave Gail on the wedding day, and they had a similar speech, like, I know I drive you crazy sometimes, but I love you, and she's like, I love you too. And we also had something similar when Deirdre married Ken for the second time, and Blanche gives this wonderful speech of like, oh, good girl, Deirdre.
I know.
That kind of thing means so much, because you enjoy the bickering, but you do want them to still have this lovely familial bond, which those two did.
Has a completely different flavour when there's no love. It becomes something incredibly sinister and tragic. So you need to know that despite all of it, deep down inside, that it's coming from a place of love. And the best, most successful parent-child relationships on Coronation Street have this very deep foundation of that years and years and years of really caring for each other, even though you don't really very often see it. There's not very many sweet
I mean, think of Jack and Vera as well, who were always at each other's throats, and Vera trying to make her advances on Jack, and him sheltering, slinking away. No, it's not. But it's another one of those relationships that, like, they love each other, but so it doesn't matter how much they bicker, because you know that they're so important to each other. And then you get the lovely scenes where, like, Jack and Vera are in bed, and she's saying, if I could live this life again, I'd still choose it with you. Or the kiss when Jack dies and Vera comes down to whisk him away. That's the kind of thing I really, really love. And the soap opera genre is good for that, because it's not necessarily something that you can build just over the course of an hour drama quite so effectively.
I think also in this country we're not very demonstrable when it comes to affection. And we find it very suspicious when people are overly enthusiastic or lovely about something. You think they must be mad. And so it's nice. I think a lot of people, there are loads of people in this country who've probably never said I love you to their parents as a grown up.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, lovely family relationship. And, back in the day, Coronation Street did have scenes that were just what's going on at the Tanner's house or what's happening at number 5.
I love that.
And yeah, so there's nothing specific particularly I can draw upon here, partly because we haven't seen so much of it, but just the two of them together. It's just great, just absolutely great.
Yeah, just normal everyday banter of you drank all the milk. And
yeah.
You haven't done the washing up, and
yeah, exactly.
Why is there a monkey in my kitchen?
Well, yeah, this is great. This is the "Why is there a gorilla in my sink?"
Yeah.
is the Elsie Tanner quote, and we'll come to his showbiz side and the story behind that later. I wanted to touch just briefly because it was a brief part of his character about this whole bad boy image that Tony Warren originally
Leather
created
for
him. Yeah, so he's always under suspicion of having done something wrong, but I wouldn't say it was very often that he really did be the bad boy or
maligned.
Make the wrong choice.
He's not like a Charlie Stubbs.
No, not at all.
Coronation Street's idea of a bad boy back in the day was like buying lots of sinks and trying to sell them.
But he was proof of the sort of stigma that you get if you've been arrested, imprisoned at a young age, and the fact that you can't shake that.
Well, this was very much part of like the sort of the social history of Coronation Street. And I think it's kind of hilarious now that almost everybody on the street has been arrested and been imprisoned. Whether they did it or not is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, you're more of a weirdo if you haven't spent a night in the cells.
But like, this really does show the stigma of how difficult it was for somebody like Dennis to sort of go down the straight and narrow. Because not only was he not getting jobs because of his past, but everyone he knew was a bit bent. And it was really hard to make new friends or acquaintances and make anything of yourself when everyone you know is trying to drag you back in. And it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't nasty, like dramatic, super, front of the soap magazines, not that there were any, kind of stuff like robbing banks like characters do now or doing drug deals. It was, breaking into things.
Petty cash stealing.
Nobody does that anymore.
Petty theft. Bit of scrumping.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? Yeah, you're right. So we see this in action. Well, not just in the first episode where Elsie's accusing him of taking money from the purse, but by the end of the month, December 1960, the very first month the show's on air, Dennis has been hauled into the police station again on suspicion of breaking and entering into a shop, but he swears he didn't do it. And he nearly runs away from Weatherfield, but luckily Harry Hewitt from number 7 mentions to Elsie that he remembers seeing Dennis at the dog track at the time, so saves his bacon. So yeah, he was always just had a head over one shoulder thinking that the law were going to come after him. And yeah, like you said, he was very, very easily led, and this was the character direction that they took a swerve with. And they said, well, this is what he's not a bad lad at heart. He's just, Jed Stone. He told him to rob this news agent, so he did it. And
yeah, also back in the day, I mean, this still happens now, but there would have been a local bobby, and they would have known every family, and they would have gone, well, who do you think did this? It was probably Dennis Tanner.
Yeah, go and have a word with that lad at number 11. Yeah. Exactly.
I know he's been in prison. Yeah. I know that kid. He's probably the one that did it.
A year later, literally a year to the month later, he's under suspicion of nicking again because £20 goes missing from the Rovers' till. And Dennis had been alone in the bar for a while that evening as well. And Annie Walker, who does look down her nose at the Tanners, doesn't she? Thinks, well, it's clearly Dennis. So she bars him from the pub, and then you get an early 1962. It's
a feud.
It was very kind of tense episodes, and kind of exciting to see who it was that had taken the money. It turns out that it was stuck behind the back of the till, wasn't there? And Annie's like very ashamed when she reaches behind it and finds it.
Elsie gets her nose put out of joint because she can't believe that her son's being accused. I think she boycotts the Rovers, and then the money starts...
Yeah, she starts encouraging everybody to boycott the Rovers.
Annie and Jack are starting to feel the pinch, and Jack didn't, I don't think, approved of Annie, the way Annie handled it in the first place. And then it turns out she was wrong all along. Exactly.
There's just very little criminal stuff, really. 1966, I found something. We've not seen this because he's gone to Carlisle comes back to Weatherfield in a couple of months later. He's in trouble because he owes some mobsters £94, so he's got involved in something dodgy over on Carlisle. Elsie gets him a job in the betting shop, but he ends up gambling his wages and loses. So it's kind of a war, and that's another like wah, 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 kind of.
That's definitely the sort of thing that he would do.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, the thugs end up tracking down Elsie and Dennis and trap them inside. So there's another hostage situation there. Eventually, they relent when Len hands them the money, and Dennis has a job at the builder's yard to try and pay him back. But literally, there's so little criminal stuff in Dennis's life. But he had this reputation that he just couldn't shake. And the fact that he would, get in with weird novelty showbiz acts, and he was such a charmer, I think it was easy to suspect him.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what's going on behind that smile? But often it was just really genuine because he was a nice chap.
He's always looking for a quick way to make money and like skip hard work. So that's why he got in trouble quite a lot.
Yeah, he did. He wanted to get a quick buck, but he very rarely did anything completely against the law because of it. We find out that after he leaves Coronation Street in late 60s that he goes to prison again for some double glazing scam, I think it was. And it just to me doesn't ring true. Although, if you're going to have somebody... I think that was when he was in prison with Eddie Yates, I'm going to say. Or was Eddie in prison with Jed? I don't remember. But yeah, very little on the criminal side. What Dennis's true passion was showbiz. Yeah. And this is what we all remember Dennis for, and all the funny little capers that he got up to, because he wanted to see his name up there in lights, even if it's little lights underneath the main act, because he had these aspirations of becoming a big star.
Well, he wanted to be a singer.
Yeah. But he just didn't have the talent for it, did he?
No.
And we got to see a lot more of him behind the scenes. He was a talent scout. He was kind of like Alec Gilroy before Alec Gilroy, wasn't he? But Alec Gilroy was a real sleazebag. We've seen early episodes of him in the 70s, and he's there schmoozing about the clubs with his horrible suit on and his cigar, and it's just dirty and grimy, and you just couldn't trust Alec, could you? Because he was always trying to pull a fast one. But Dennis, from what I've seen, really did just want to say, hey, let's entertain people.
Let's be part of the fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I think... Was this on a DVD episode, or did we watch it on YouTube? Because we used to fill in the gaps with YouTube videos when we could find them during COVID. But I pretty much remember one episode when he decides to be a showbiz scout instead of being an act, because the guy who's interviewing him, or the office, he's like, you get more money being a scout, and he's like, what? Okay. But anyway, so in the first year of the show, the final episode of the year, he gets a job at the front of house for the Orinoco Club, which you all will remember as the stomping ground of one Rita Tanner.
She mentioned it just recently, in fact, didn't
so
she?
This was a bit of a seedy place. Singers, strippers, dancers. But Dennis, this is where his passion is flamed, isn't it? We
only get to see inside that club for 3 episodes, twice in 1961 and once in 1963.
I do remember seeing it, though, because wasn't there a bit where Rita has to go at somebody?
I can't remember whether that's Orinoco. There were a few clubs, weren't there?
I think they were
back
going
in the
to
day.
one.
I think that must have been one of the other ones.
She said them all, didn't she, Rita, this week?
Yeah.
Orinoco, Zambezi.
Maybe it was Zambezi where she... It's during that Hey Big Spender act, wasn't it?
There was another one.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Anyway.
Yeah, so he's working, doing the unsavoury jobs at the Orinoco Club.
Well,
cleaning
no, he's
toilets.
not. I would have said the dancing was more unsavoury. Cleaning toilets is a good, honest job, Michael. I've done that. I've not done dancing with my boobs out, though. So he gets his loyalty is rewarded. He gets given a solo singing spot. He calls himself Ricky Dennis. He gets a guitar, goes on stage, and actually everybody really enjoys it.
He's so entertaining with his guitar, isn't he? He's just so full. Yeah, the actor is so full of life, and because he was an entertainer himself.
Yeah.
So is a double entertaining, playing a character who also just wants to make people smile.
I don't think...
funny. Didn't he have his guitar secretly hidden under his bed or something?
I'm not going to say...
hide it from Elsie.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think this type of person doesn't exist anymore. But I do think there are not very many opportunities to be this kind of person.
Well, Britain's Got Talent has taken the lion's share.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who is like a music hall entertainer from, back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, that kind of variety act, all-round entertainer. You can sing, you can dance, you can be an MC. Glenda's like the nearest we got, and because she worked on the cruise ships, and I think that's the only place that kind of person exists now. But everybody on Corrie, or pretty much most of the people on Corrie, of a certain age, went through this process, and that's how they ended up on Corrie. Quite a lot of them were music hall acts, and a lot of them who were alive during the war, who were adults, were performers.
Yeah, like Jill Summers. And,
they didn't go and fight, but they stayed and they entertained the troops. And I think that's actually a magical thing about the early days of Coronation Street, and that kind of generation of actors that came through Coronation Street, and they brought that real love of just entertaining people with them. And I'm not casting aspersions on anybody, but I do think that there's a different sort of person in Corrie now. I think being an actor or being famous are the two things that people get into Corrie for. And I think that being an entertainer is a different kind of concept.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And I don't think that one of obviously we need people who are really serious about the craft of acting, but there's that spark that you get with people like Glenda and people like Dennis, that's just something really magical and fun.
I think I like the fact that he still became an agent rather than being an entertainer himself, because there's probably only so many stories that you can do with being an entertainer, and it's, is he going to get whisked away somewhere? What we got with him being a talent scout is the stories here, there, where he brings people in, or you get your monkey or your snake, and when we saw it with
lady.
or when you got with that with Alec Gilroy as well, didn't you? Bringing in his big Welsh singer to sing in the Rovers bar or what have you.
But it was a really exciting time to be interested in music as well in the 60s in the North.
For sure. Yeah,
and so this is like tapping into some, part of important part of the culture.
Yeah, this was the dawn of pop music. This is Beatles era, isn't it? And Dennis was right there with the rest of them.
Yeah, so theatrical agent Lenny Phillips was not very impressed with Dennis's act, but this is when he makes him a talent scout, and then he gets made an assistant manager. He gives Jed a job at the club, and then in November, this is when it's the equity strike, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
And Dennis gets tasked with looking after Rupert, who is a performing monkey, and Elsie ends up finding him in a sink, and then he escapes and goes to the Rovers, and he smashes a load of glasses.
That's one on YouTube,
doesn't he? And
that's worth tracking down this episode.
And they're like, what the hell? What's happened here?
Can you imagine having a performing monkey?
People would lose their minds.
Yeah. It was funny because when we were watching the Road to Coronation Street the other day, they were showing some of the PG Tips adverts on the monitors just before the first episode of Coronation Street was broadcast. And we and you grew up in an era where PG Tips adverts were full of performing monkeys.
And we were like,
they'd be flipping CG these days, wouldn't they?
And we were like, these monkeys, they know what life's about.
It was kind of fun. It was fun, but looking back on it, it was terrible.
I don't think. Look, it's really bad to say, but I think those monkeys, there were worse things to do than drink tea.
Oh, yeah. But you got to track down this episode. It's the best.
Chimpanzees, sorry. The main reason that you shouldn't work with chimpanzees is that they rip your face off.
Because this chimp, like, there are scenes of Dennis carrying this chimp around, and he's got his arms around him, hugging him, and then Elsie finds her in the sink, and then you get the scene towards the end of the episode where Jack and Annie are upstairs in the Rovers, and they hear a kerfuffle down in the bar, and Rupert's there sitting on Ina Sharple's chair with a bottle of stout or something. It's really funny, and they had to do this because, as you said, this was during the equity strike when there was only 12, 13 human actors that were left on the show, and they had to fill the gaps somewhere.
Did Philip Lowrie talk about working with animals on that?
I don't think he did. No, I don't think he did.
I would have loved to have asked him about that.
It's at times of desperation where you're forced to be creative.
Yeah.
And this was some of the best stuff that came out of it. There were some really weird episodes during that equity strike period, weren't there?
Do you know what I say about working with apes?
What do you say?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Nope.
Nope. 1962,
Okay.
another classic episode. This is the Blue Streak Rockets.
This is the water lion, the sea lion episode, isn't it?
Well, he's supposed to be organising a charity concert for the over 60s.
Yeah.
The Blue Streak Rockets get banned from performing by the police.
These are some dancing ladies.
Yeah.
They've had an act on in a few other theatres around the country where they've just been banned for being too raunchy.
Morality police are like, no, this is Britain.
Yeah.
So the other main act's transport breaks down on the way to the mission. So he's got to cancel this concert, and now he's got to find somewhere to put the acts, who are the lovely ladies, and also 2 performing sea lions, and they all end up in the Rovers. And I think Jack and Annie go out for a meal.
Yeah, I think Dennis thinks that they're away for longer, and they come back.
And then Annie goes into the bathroom, comes back out, goes, Jack!
So funny. It's so funny.
Oh my goodness.
Those Blue Street Rockets didn't actually appear in the episode because, again, it was during the strike, so they were talked about, but never seen.
So weird, because in my head I think I can see what they look like.
And then during the episode, you got Dennis completely aflap because his planned concert spectacular for the over 60s is going completely Pete Tong, and he's there behind the curtain, and you can hear the noise of the crowd the other side of the curtain. But obviously there's nobody there. It was quite an ambitious episode to have, considering the cast was so small.
Well, they definitely had
you
sea
gotta
lions.
watch that. It was the best. It was brilliant.
Right,
and sea lions in the bath, proper classic Corrie moment.
That was the last time we saw Dennis for a bit.
Yeah, that was his final
to
episode
London.
before going off. And yeah, when we were watching some of those, it's like, oh, is he not in it anymore? But yeah, that was his final appearance. The shame of the failed concert made him head down south to London.
Well, the story was he goes to open a new talent agency in London with Lenny Phillips. Mm-hmm. So over the summer he sets up in 1963 Tanner Enterprises and starts to audition showbiz acts.
Yeah, this is his story when he returns to the programme.
And then he finds Brett Falcon, aka Walter Potts, the singing window cleaner.
We've seen bits of Brett Falcon on the DVDs, haven't we?
Yeah.
I love this story because he was like a real life pop star who played himself kind of
I know,
in the show.
It's weird.
This is fourth wall breaky, isn't it?
This is like, if Corrie did this now, people would be fuming because it kind of launched this real career. I
can't remember what the actor was called,
no.
But the character was Walter Potts, but his showbiz persona, well, he was rechristened as Brett Falcon. I think it was probably Dennis that came up with that name, because Walter Potts isn't really a pop star name, is it?
No, Dennis needs this to work because he gets 40% of everything that Brett Falcon earns, and he ends up moving in with number 11, but they kick him out because he's too loud. Everyone loves him, and then in real life, Not Too Little, Not Too Much, the song that Walter records in November in the show, gets released in real life and gets to number 17 in the charts.
Yeah, I just can't imagine it.
And wasn't there a
character
scene
having a song that is promoting a real life single?
There's a scene where he's mobbed by these teenage girls, and they had to build the set, didn't they? And they
I think that was early '64.
They didn't have actually a tall enough outdoor set, did they?
No.
And so either they had to build a bit more, or they couldn't put the camera higher than a certain level.
I think that the story,
weird.
I can't remember, I think the story with this was it was one of the first times that they actually filmed outside. They had to move some of the indoor sets outdoors so that they could have the full length of the street.
Did they put it in a car park or something?
Yeah, I think they did.
And they're like, oh,
it was
Brett
proper
Falcon.
Beatles mania.
Yeah.
And Dennis is there cashing it in.
You just imagine the people at Granada going, look, if we can get a tiny amount of this Beatles cash.
Yeah.
It's so
funny. That was really capturing the zeitgeist, wasn't it? But sadly, Walter ends up moving down to London himself because the agreement that he agreed with Dennis was not signed at all. It was just like a gentleman's agreement of I'll be your agent, and then somebody comes and poaches him. And Dennis is like, oh, oops. I suppose I'd better let you go then. So that's the end of that little saga. And I am looking forward to seeing a bit more of that because I just find it very odd having a pop star character.
I love it. I just love how wacky and experimental Coronation Street has been, and we don't really give it credit.
No, I know.
Because when it does something a bit mad like it's doing now with the Emmerdale crossover, everyone's like, what? How weird. But they certainly would have done this back in the day if they'd had the chance.
I think they probably would.
Yeah, they would have done.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of the year, Dennis arranges a This Is Your Life tribute for Annie Walker, and that's when Billy and Joan, her children, come back.
And Esther Hayes
Esther
is there
Hayes,
as well.
yeah.
So hello, I'm still in the pro. Because Esther Hayes was Yeah,
she moves to an efficiency flat.
I never liked Esther Hayes. You're a bit more fond of her, but yeah, she came back for this. Anyway, that was just I loved how there was somebody who would put on these acts, and Corrie was always doing one theatrical thing or another, weren't they? Like the Christmas pantos, and Dennis being there to charm the crowds and Dennis, put it all together. There is a little bit of him in Glenda.
Yeah. Dennis cobbles everything together with this desperate enthusiasm.
Yes.
That the energy just bobs you along with him.
Mm. Yeah, and you kind of think it's funny when it goes wrong, but then you feel sorry for him as well.
Yeah.
But not really that much. And he's just the kind of character that you really, really want to succeed.
Yeah, you're rooting for him.
Yeah.
I think Glenda does more things right. I think Glenda's less likely for things to go wrong.
She is not half as hapless as Dennis is.
Yeah. So anyway, Annie doesn't like this very much because one of the stories that comes out is that she was Lady Godiva in a parade 30 years before.
Just wearing a body stocking, I think.
Oh, dearie me. So Dennis gets sacked at the end of the year because he didn't get enough bookings over Christmas. And sad. Yeah,
the boss's nephew at the place where he's working arrives to take over his job. So that's the end of that.
1964, the house is besieged by Walter Potts fans or Brett Falcon fans.
Oh yeah, that's right. Walter was still in 1964, wasn't he?
And Dennis has to smuggle him out of the house and to do a national tour, and also to go to Cannes. Cannes.
Not Cannes. That's different.
I've been to both.
You've not been to Cannes?
Yes, I have. Walter is so grateful. He sends Dennis
to collect your award.
Enough money to install a new bathroom.
Yeah.
At the house.
Fun.
Probably because he found it a bit.
Yeah, that was kind of the end of his showbiz career, really, with Walter Potts. So it is kind of fun that he brought it back in 2013. We saw it with Alec as well, that variety act just stopped happening. It wasn't thing.
It doesn't happen
from the 80s onwards, was it?
I mean, there are certain places, obviously, where you've got circuits of these days. I don't think it exists that much down south. I think it's...
Is it more of a norm?
No, I think that there are definitely clubs and venues up north where you still get like tribute acts and comedy acts and variety acts. I've never seen anything like it down here. I've not looked, but I've certainly seen adverts for it up north. Yeah. But anyway, Dennis goes and he works for like Heidi High.
Yeah, he does have a holiday camp job at some point. Yeah, but that wasn't the only work that he got. Because, in the vein of some of the best Corrie scroungers, he did jump from job to job during his time in Coronation Street.
Haplessly.
He never settled in the same place of work because he probably usually did something that made him get fired. Yeah, so there's a few things that he does. Like it's jobs. When I was putting the notes together for this, I kind of put jobs together with just like silly capers as well, because the jobs in some ways were silly capers because he only kept hold of them for a little while. But there was...
You haven't got in about him buying all those Christmas trees. He bought a load of Christmas trees.
I've got that in there. I've got that in there. In 1962, some of the capers included taking Harry Hewitt's dog for a walk and then letting it off the leash, even though he was told don't let her off the leash. There was a scene that's not available on YouTube. It sounds hilarious, where he is unfreezing the pipes at Minnie Caldwell's house with a blowtorch over a particularly sharp freeze early on in the year, and he ends up bursting the pipes and then water sprays everywhere. That sounds hilarious. Then you got a scene, and again, this is just like, it must have been such a treat to write. There's a scene where Dennis helps out at the Rovers, and I think it was because the Orinoco Club closed for a few weeks mid-1962, and he just throws himself into it, just like he throws himself into everything, and he takes on this persona of the new kind of cocktail shaking barman.
Well, he does a bit like what Gemma and Henry did to the Rovers, where he's like, let's liven this place up.
Let's zhuzh it up. He puts up lights and flags, plays loud music, hands out free drinks, hands out crisps to people to make the punters thirstier, and he gets this cocktail together of his own creation called the Atomic Warhead Cocktail. And this is just like you said, the Uber Duber that Gemma and Henry made. Basically everyone gets sozzled, and at the end of the night they've all had a wonderful time, but then Dennis and Jack accidentally get locked out of the pub which leads nicely into the next episode, which is them trying to climb their way back into the club. It was just such a
they get locked out.
They get locked out of the pub, then they have to try and climb back in, and they're carrying a ladder down the street. He smashes a window. Just fun, kind of single episode.
Silly
caperings. Yeah, it's not bobbins. Bobbins gives it a negative connotation.
I don't think bobbins is always bad.
Yeah. He gets a job at Amalgamated Steel in 1964.
Like
yeah, that Amalgamated Steel doesn't sound like a nice place to work, because Ken lasted about a week or two there, didn't he, in 1962? And I can't remember why he left in the end. Was it?
Because he doesn't want that kind of work.
I thought it was that he didn't like some of the office banter there.
I thought he had to do something horrible, like make someone redundant.
Oh yes, I think maybe he did. Yeah, he had to make someone redundant, so he left. Dennis went to this business as well. He hated it so much because his workmates were continually playing pranks on him, so he deliberately gets himself sacked by taking the blame for a crate that gets smashed. Luckily though, he does get his job back at the club after that, so it's only a short one. And Amalgamated Steel does still exist in 2025 in the world of Weatherfield, doesn't it? Because there is a advert for it up in the precinct, and it was a nice idea from one of the designers there when they were putting that set together, and they needed a business to have on it, and some bright spark said, "Oh, how about Amalgamated Steel?" So it's been brought back again. Love it. You got hairdressing is another career from Dennis. I completely forgot it. Did you remember?
David.
Did you remember? Yeah, like David again.
No, I didn't remember this.
So that feels like quite a good career for him, because he liked to talk and he liked to get to know people, and he was very cheery and charming.
Wanted to be creative.
Yeah, exactly. So he kind of shadows Val Barlow at her salon for a little bit, which ends up with Lucille getting her hair accidentally dyed blonde, and so he kind of goes through for the next year, and he's a hairdresser. I wonder whether they ever thought about the idea of having him work in the salon on his return to Coronation Street. I guess his hands weren't quite so nimble as someone in their 70s, but I know Audrey can still do it.
Would have wanted Dennis, as he was then, to give them a haircut.
Well, maybe not with the scruffy tramp look.
No, he needed some kind of product in his hair.
I think that they could have at least had a scene or an episode where he says, "I'll take over in the salon today, Audrey." This used to be my bread and butter.
It's really funny
that had comedy episode written all over it.
It's really funny how quite a lot of famous straight hairdressers who are men are aggressively they pretend try to be really masculine, but Dennis and David, who are our two straight male hairdressers, and Corrie, were so camp, even though their characters are supposed to be straight. And I love how sarcastic they both are. I don't think I'd want them to do my hair because I'd be scared of what they thought.
I'd have Dennis cut my hair.
I bet you would.
He ends up kind of not going too far down that route of hairdressing. He finds out in early 65 that the £65 course that he went on last year only qualified him to work in this fancy salon, and he couldn't go anywhere else. Then he ends up quitting because he can't get a pay rise, so that kind of puts the end to that, really. Yeah. Also, speaking of 1965, I do want to give a quick shout out to the Blue John Mines episode, which was one of my favourite episodes of all time, definitely from the 60s. And one of the fun things that Dennis gets up to there is accidentally, in inverted commas, dropping a ring of Elsie's down into this bottomless pit just for larks, because
just for
it's the kind of guy he
was. And in
was.
case we've got any new listeners who don't know what Blue John Mine is, it's a mineral. It's like a precious mineral that's very, very rare. I think there's only 2 or 3 places in the whole world. It's like blue mineral, and Blue John Mine's where you get it from.
Yeah, good episode. You couldn't tell it was blue though because it's in black and white. Could have been any colour as far as I know. Yeah. Anyway, he works at the corner shop for a bit in 65 as well. Which is, it's not great. I'll talk more about his romantic liaisons later, but this ended up putting him with a lot of time with Sandra Petty, whose dad run the shop there, and he didn't really like that, so he didn't work there for long. He gets a job at a toy company, which is brilliant. And
he's a rep for a toy company.
Yeah, which is what Derek worked as a toy company rep, didn't he?
He was a rep for all different things.
Yeah, but he works for a toy company for a bit. What
were they called? No. What did he call them? Like amusements or diversions or?
Oh yeah, something like that.
He had some kind of weird word that you wouldn't use.
Yeah. This is a bit Peter Griffinish as well, because he works as in a toy factory in the first series of Family Guy, doesn't he? The first few series. I love how this man-child is going around showing toys.
Is he like... Is Dennis Tanner like the origin of so many characters that we didn't even realise?
He is. I think that's what we're discovering from this.
The originator.
Yeah, the progenitor.
Family Guy, David Platt. That's about it.
So we get, Caper, another Caper in 65, as he gets all health conscious for a bit. He starts worrying about his weight, gets into a training program with David Barlow, and Jerry lends him some dumbbells, but he gets tired of it before long, and then launches his own trading company called Tanner's Enterprises. This is when he ordered the famous, now infamous, red phone at number 11. There weren't many places on the street that had phones in the 60s, were there? You get lots of scenes where people have to go to the Rover's Return and borrow Jack and Annie's. So this was one of the earliest phones on the street. And to this day, there is a red telephone in number 11 Coronation Street, and it all stems back to this one that Dennis got to help him with his business pursuits. So this is when, here we go, Gemma. I do have this.
I thought this happened so much earlier.
No, because we saw this on the DVDs.
Yeah,
we saw it years ago. But yeah, he gets a delivery as part of his Tanner's Enterprises of 108 Christmas trees.
I don't think he really thought this through.
It's a bit, it's like Kirk and his turkeys, isn't it? When he has to throw them into the river to get rid of them. And Eddie Yates is, 10, 15 years later would get himself into similar scrapes where he thinks he's got some brilliant business idea and it just goes wrong for him. But he's ended up with 108 Christmas trees, which he has to try and store. He tries to put them in the neighbours' backyards, doesn't get
Elsie
anywhere.
Is not happy about
this. He's also got 144 boxes of crackers as well, which he ends up storing in the loft of Gamma Garments because his girlfriend Sandra is working there. But that was a fun little...
Emily finds out and is not having it.
No, that was a fun little thing at the end of the year. So 1966, this was weird. I've never seen this before. Dennis borrows Emily Nugent, I guess she still was there, camera.
Yeah, because Emily got into photography, didn't she? And that's her and
oh, that's how her and Ernest got together.
That was their thing, and Ernest had
passion.
A photography studio.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, he's got Emily's cameras, and he decides to take pictures of Jerry. Well, Jerry Booth, who was notorious wet builder of the street, says, "Oh, can you take some photos of me in all my sporting gear?" And Dennis is like, "Yeah, all right then." So Jerry's trying to look all tough in his macho PE kit, and then Dennis is just making fun of him about it, but manages to get him to strip down, supposedly to show more of his muscles off. And then he photographs Jerry half naked or nearly naked, and bit odd. And then the photos end up making their way into the Rovers, and everybody's seeing these pictures of half-naked Jerry Booth. And this wasn't an issues story.
No.
Nowadays, we had that story of Max having his picture of his privates getting shown all around the school, now we were learning something. Here, it was more a case of, "Oh, Jerry, well, you shouldn't have done that there, should you?
You shouldn't have let Dennis take your photo."
No. And then we just forgot about it. I didn't feel like
Victim blaming.
I've not seen it, but I imagine I didn't feel like I would have been learning anything there particularly. Just having a laugh.
I think I already knew that. Not to do
so, later on, you got a story with him and Jed. And Jed's a character that comes in and out of the street over the 60s. So they had this shared history because that's why... Dennis was in prison in 1960, and they get up to these caperings. They were very similar in age, weren't they? All the same age. Yeah, they were. They definitely were, which is... It's kind of interesting, the fact that Kenneth Cope died so very recently, and Philip Lowrie only outlasted him by, 6 months or so.
Right, that's interesting.
Anyway, so Dennis and Jed... mid-1966 discover that clubman Fred Nuttall is adding a massive amount of interest to a loan that Minnie Caldwell, Jed's landlady, took out with him. So they con money out of him by selling a load of reject socks to him for £20. Minnie's debt's repaid, and then when Nuttall tries to confront Dennis about him, Dennis lies and says, the socks are stolen actually, so you better stay quiet or the police are going to be coming knocking on your door because of you being in possession of stolen knitwear. So that certainly sounds like a caper to me. They just get involved in various get-rich-quick scenes, really. Writing song lyrics together is another one of them, with Ina as their musician. Jen even hired the arch under the viaduct to expand their business there, and you go through a little bit in 66 with them working under the viaduct, and I always think this is like funny Gary. As well. Yeah, back in the day there was only one sort of archway that you would see on the set, and it was very much a painted backdrop, wasn't it? But they do move into this painted backdrop with the viaduct bargain boutique for a bit, and I think this is probably, I imagine, I might be wrong, the first business that was run out of there, because later on you get like Jim McDonald has got a bike shop there, hasn't he? And then you got the joinery and now the bistro. But it's funny that it kind of started there. Anyway, he gets sacked from his toy company job because of this, but the business gets off.
Because he's doing too much work.
Yeah, too much. It doesn't go very well anyway. Minnie Caldwell is revealed to be the special celebrity guest who's opening it on the first day. Nobody buys anything. And then they realise they're supposed to have got planning permission, so it just all collapses within a week.
This is issue, based storyline.
Yeah, this is a PSA about make sure you get planning permission. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, that's kind of it for the best caperings of 1966. 1967, you got the fire at Len Fairclough's house caused by Dennis when he offers to redecorate for Len's place, but then Patrick Stewart comes along and sorts that all out. In April of 67.
Well, he's working for Len at that time.
He is working for Len for a bit. For the yard. I think that was to pay him back for the money that Len gave him after that whole other hostage situation.
Yeah, you don't
anyway,
talk about that.
Emily gives Dennis in April a job as debt collector at Gamma Garments, and I've not seen any of this, but I can't really picture Dennis as being
he's not heavy,
particularly willing.
But he's just like heavy. Gary. He has a business under the Arches, and he's also a loan shark.
You're right, he's just the progenitor of all Coronation Street characters, Dennis Tanner. Anyway, he tries to resign, and Emily's like, no, you're not resigning. So he carries on repossessing goods from people. I just can't see that was his thing whatsoever. No. But he ends up getting somebody to be his debt collector for him, but there's not the best job. Then you've got him turning number 11 into a theatrical digs, and this is during Elsie's honeymoon when she's just got married to Steve Tanner and the house is Dennis's.
Well, and he just brings in. Don't they also move to America? And she comes back.
Yes, you're right. They've moved to America.
Hated that.
Yeah, because she doesn't have a good time, does she? Dennis just gets a load of theatrical types to come and stay with him, and that's a fun extra bit of his showbiz career. So he's got a girls' bagpipe band there for a bit, and then a somersault act.
This just all sounds made up.
It just sounds fun.
I want to watch
fun
this.
Caperings. And then that's kind of it. He ends up in 1968. He's selling hairdressing sundries, getting a job at a barber's, but that's the year that he leaves. Aww. Yeah. So he had his finger in many pies employment wise, didn't he, Dennis? And some of the best kind of cheeky scallies of characters do jump from jobs to jobs because that just creates fun stories and scenarios for them to enjoy, for us to enjoy. Yeah. Less. I think a final category to talk about is the romance side. So we saw him getting married to Rita. It didn't go so well for him.
But who else was lighting his flame of passion?
Not many people, and most of the girls that he took up with, it just didn't really go so well, did it?
No. Who's this? So he was dating a stripper and her stage name was La Composite.
Yeah. I can't even remember whether she had an actual proper human name. But this led to another funny episode with her where she's bringing around this pet python that she uses in her act, and Elsie finds it.
Well, yeah, she's stringing him along, and
yeah, I think there's
sends her on her way
because Dennis is genuinely a nice guy. He's very easily string-alongable, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
1963.
This was funny. This was on the. I thought this was on the DVDs. This one.
Mavis Fox turns up, and he had stayed with her in London, and he pretended that he was from a rich family in Weatherfield, and this was when he makes Elsie play along with this whole charade, and he's putting on a funny accent, and so is she. So this woman turns up and he's like, oh, hello, this isn't my real house, this is my grand's house. This woman, she's not my mum, she's my cleaner.
It's really funny.
And Elsie's like, hello.
It's really, really funny. She just kind of goes along with it for the lulz, doesn't she?
Well, she hears about all these lies that Dennis has told about his life. And then when she finally gets him alone, she's like, you need to tell this woman that you're a liar. But he strings her along for a little bit longer. But
Takes
she
her
finds
to an art
out.
gallery or something, doesn't
he? Yeah, I think I remember that.
That's a really funny episode, and it's another one that shows just the fun bond that Dennis and Elsie had together.
Yeah, because she was game for humouring him.
Pretending to be his grandma.
Hello.
Yeah.
No, his cleaner, not his grandma.
Oh, sorry, the cleaner. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway.
The woman,
Mavis dumps him.
Yeah. It's just a string of unsuccessful romantic partners.
Liaisons.
Yeah, for fun.
Yeah. Go on, do the next one.
Then you got Sandra Petty coming along, and we've seen bits of her. I think she was a bit of a wet blanket.
She's boring, rubbish.
I think she was supposed to be, though.
Because her dad was Lionel Petty, was a scary guy.
Yeah, he was a very kind of military, kind of drill sergeant kind of guy who ran the corner shop.
He was like the dad in Mary Poppins, where he's like in charge of something. No, not the granddad who kept firing a cannon off the top of the roof, and it's like, calm down, it's not the war.
He was also a bit like Emily Bishop's dad, who was also very
weird, scary.
Yeah, stickler. And anyway, when Dennis passes his hairdressing exams, he starts to receive these anonymous love letters, and it turns out that Sandra Petty, who was one of the clients of his during his training, he inadvertently made quite an impression of her, and I think on her. I think we're supposed to think that, again, like Emily, you've got this really overbearing father, which just leaves the daughter a mouse because they then be anything else. But this girl is very sweet on Dennis and is sending him these letters. And she makes an unexpected appearance at number 11 one day, but he thinks that. I think she was a bit stalkerish as well. She had leaflets for Gretna Green in her bag, and he sees them and thinks, crikey, I need to get out of this. She's going to try and whip me off and get me down the aisle. So he says to her,
I might have known.
I should have known.
Oh, that's
he's engaged to Irma. That's what he says. He says he's engaged to Irma Ogden, who has to go along with the ruse. They're just ruses.
I know. I love a good ruse.
His life was a series of ruses. So Sandra leaves disappointed.
One might even say that
but
the whole idea of Dennis himself was a ruse.
Yeah, basically. She comes back the next year, but in between then, this is when we get to see Rita, and we kind of mentioned this before. She was only in it one episode. She ends up in Elsie's bed. Charlie Moffat, as part of the scene, puts his foot through the ceiling. If you want to know more about that, you're just going to have to watch it. I would if I were you. It's great. So, more lady trouble for Dennis in the beginning of 1965. He thinks he's hit the jackpot by wooing this wealthy hairdressing client of his called Carrie Critchley. No relation to Aidan Critchley, I assume.
Well, we don't know, do we?
No. She and her friend Jane invite Dennis to a motor racing outing. Motor rating.
Rubbish, good, rubbish, nice colour.
At Alton Park. I've not seen this episode, but I want to see it. And this is available on YouTube, so I will get to it one day. But really, they just want to make fun of him. It's yet another person that's just stringing him along because he's so nice and gullible.
Well, they make him buy the drinks.
Yeah, they know he's broke, but they end up they get him to buy all the drinks for everybody. And then you got one of their friends telling him, "Oh, well, you like Carrie's sports car, do you? You could probably get a second-hand one for only £600," knowing full well that David could never afford £600. And poor Dennis, he's like, "Oh, what can I do to try and keep up with these poshos?" Well, I know David Barlow, the famous footballer, who's Ken's brother.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they'd never even heard of him. Well, one of them had heard of him, but only because they'd read an article about him throwing a match for a bribe, apparently. But anyway, eventually they get bored of Dennis, ditch him, and that's the end of that. Then we get Sandra Petty coming back again. She's trying to get her dad Lionel to buy the shop, basically, so she can be close to Dennis. And like I said earlier, Dennis does end up working at the shop for a little bit. But it doesn't work out, basically.
Oh.
Yeah, sad times for Dennis. Well, luckily for Dennis, it doesn't work out. Then you get him in 1967 with a Swedish girlfriend. Again, we've not seen any of this. This sounds kind of fun. Inga is her name.
Inga.
Why?
We've got an Inga.
Have we?
Haven't we?
What do you mean? We've got an Inga.
Inga.
Oh, yeah, Inga. We do have a listener called Inga. You're right. This is Inga with an A and our Inga is an ER.
Ingas.
Anyway, Dennis gets annoyed because everyone else seems obsessed with her and he can't, because she's this foreign curiosity and he can't get any time with her. Before long, she has to return to Sweden, And she and Dennis try to have a final night of passion together in gamma garments, but they're caught out by Emily and Mr. Papagopoulos.
Did they cast Mr. Papagopoulos?
No, I don't think they did. I don't think he ever actually appeared. Dennis is so smitten with this Scandinavian beauty that he resigns from his shop job and decides to go to Sweden with Inga, getting a barman's job on a ferry so that he can see her once a week. Long and short of it doesn't work out. He comes back to Weatherfield the following month with her sister Karen, which is... I like Inga sounds so like exotic and...
You just imagine them going, oh yes, we have a very lovely Swedish family. This is Inga and this is Karen.
Karen, yeah. She's lying to the Swedish council saying that she's here as an au pair looking after Dennis's non-existent kids. But then when someone from the consul comes investigating, Dennis convinces Lucille to stand in and his wife. As his wife.
What a ruse.
What a ruse, exactly. The whole thing falls apart though when Steve Tanner, who Dennis is pretending to be, turns up. And anyway, Karen then buggers off again, and that's the end of that.
Are we sure that it was not Dennis that killed Steve by pushing him down the stairs?
I think so. Last bit of romance, and this is probably the closest that Dennis got to a long-lasting romance, was in 1968.
Yeah, this would have been a happy ending if we hadn't.
Yeah, it was. It was a really, really lovely wedding episode.
The return of Dennis, and found out that it all went pear-shaped.
Yeah. Well, it's a hippie he ends up going out with, because once he's got rid of all of the acrobats and various performers in number 11, Lucille convinces him to let all her hippie friends move in. And
1968.
Yeah. And he thinks that they're devil worshippers and reports them to the landlord, Mr. Wormald, who evicts them all. But Dennis ends up taking a shine to one of them, Jenny Sutton, gets her a job at the hotel where he's working at the time. But when he catches a bar steward there groping Jenny, he blackmails him. And then Jenny decides, well, look, I'm not staying around here. Going to move to London. And Dennis moves there with her as well. They return in March. There's a kind of nice story about the casting of her. But the actress who played Jenny Sutton was called Mitzi Rogers, which is a great name. And Lowrie apparently had a say in the casting of her. And he said that this girl was apparently quite strong-willed, and he's like, if anyone can go toe-to-toe with Elsie Tanner, which as Dennis's girlfriend she would have to, this Mitzi could do it. So there we go. They come back from London. I think Dennis during his time in the street did do disappearing acts for like a couple of months at a time, just so that Philip Lowrie could tread the boards a little bit and get that acting bug out on stage. But anyway, they're back. And then they pretend to Elsie that they're married, because she says, look, if you're gonna come back, you're gonna stay in separate rooms. And they say, well, we got married so we can stay in the same bed together.
This is exactly what David did.
Yeah, it was with Kylie
to Gail.
Yeah. So anyway, she finds out that that's a load of baloney, makes them sleep in separate rooms, and basically does her very best to make Jenny feel very uncomfortable. Dennis and Jenny, though, do realise that they've got something special going on here, decide to marry for real, but because her sister is also getting married soon, her dad refuses to pay, so they have to scrape together. They try to book a church, but the vicar says that you're not getting married here because you're not a churchgoer, so they settle for a register office. And this is some of the last that we see of Dennis. It's an absolutely wonderful wedding. It's the one where
it is really sweet.
The scene between, with the family, with Dennis and Elsie before the ceremony is lovely. It's also the scene where Minnie Caldwell's throws the confetti at the newlyweds, even though they're not supposed to. Jerry Booth
and she says, I wanted to.
Yeah, Jerry Booth does a lovely... it's kind of a bit of a bittersweet best man speech where he's talking about... when you say I love you, it's just a way of saying I want you to love me. That kind of thing.
Because he's just been through a bitter divorce,
hasn't he? With Myra. Yeah, exactly. It's a really... brilliant wedding episode, and it's one of these early ones in Coronation Street where they get all the
I love that.
What's it called?
The
telegrams.
Yeah, I was going to say mammograms.
Don't do those these days. Yeah, mammograms on the night of the wedding. Yeah.
No,
and that's the end of Dennis for 43 years.
He ends up getting promoted because he leaves the Jenny that night to go to do
on his wedding night. He has to go to Bristol, doesn't he,
for his job, and his boss is like, you know what, you're really keen, so I'm going to promote you. Maybe it was a double glazing company.
I don't know. I mean, we know that 5 years later in 1973, this is when we've heard he's been in prison for a double glazing scam, and Elsie goes and visits him, and that's when she has a fall over. I can't remember what storyline tied into, but she has a fall in London. But we don't get to see Dennis there at all.
He get hit by a taxi,
something like that. Apparently, in the epic novel of Coronation Street, they flesh out that scene a little bit more. But anyway, we learn that by then him and Jenny's marriage has already broken down. And yeah, as I say, that's the last we see of him until he turns up at the homeless shelter 43 years later. Goes through a couple of stories, and that's the end of Dennis until 2020 hits. 10,000th episode, and oh my gosh, there's some things that I'll just never forgive Coronation Street for, and what they did to Dennis at the end is really one of them, isn't it? It was a shocking,
Dennis,
shocking thing that he did.
Rita and Dennis are divorced, and then we find out from a letter that he had dementia and he's died.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be Linda that wrote this letter to Rita saying, yeah, he's developed dementia.
So
he's died, sends him.
Here's his ashes. Yeah. Please, can you take them to Blackpool? Because Blackpool was such an important part of his life.
I know. Have you noticed? We don't think we've mentioned Blackpool throughout this whole 2+ hour character profile. I mean, it's sort of apparently he wanted to be scattered there.
It's sort of implied that the entertainment industry kind of was quite. It was quite important, Blackpool, to it, but yeah, he never went there.
I would have
made a deal about it, but
they wanted a reason to have all the women of Coronation Street go on a coach trip, didn't they?
They could have gone to London because he did go and live in London, or they could have gone to Bristol because he did live in Bristol.
I just like the idea of him being scattered at number 11. If that's where he was born, it would have been quite. I mean, I don't think Eileen would have particularly enjoyed having that happen. But
no, he got run over in an anonymous car park in the middle of wherever, I can't remember. We did go there. It was
just on the way to Blackpool, yeah, we've been there for real.
And
the urn gets put on the floor and an ambulance comes and runs over it, and he just gets scattered across the car park, and it's just totally disrespectful, and I hate it.
Yeah.
It's such...
my headcanon is that it was another ruse. Dennis is still...
I just want to think that...
off scamming somewhere.
I don't know what they did to him, because when he left in 2014 and he was punching Norris and what have you and running off with Gloria Price a few months before, it was like they were saying, yeah, he's a villain, and he was never a villain.
I know, but
he was a bit of a cheeky chappy and a Jack the Lad and a bit of a scally, but he wasn't a bad character, and they made him one at the end. And the final ending he got with his ashes being breezed about an anonymous car park is just like saying, ha, that's what you get if you're a wrong on Coronation Street, because that's what happened to Pat Phelan's ashes in the end, didn't they? They got scattered around or thrown in a bin or something.
Baddie, your corpse will be desecrated.
Yeah, basically.
But he wasn't a baddie.
Dennis wasn't a baddie. This was not a fitting... It was just a totally unfitting. This character was a Coronation Street original, the first man to ever appear on Coronation Street, and they just say, not showing him one jot of respect. But hopefully we've done that with this character profile / tribute. And anyone, if you've not really seen much of Dennis in the early years, I would urge you, go back and watch some of those episodes. Watch the Blue John Mine episode, watch the Wedding episode, watch the Blue Rockets Sea Lion episode. There are so many brilliant ones. He's not a shining star of early Coronation Street. For me, he is the shining star that shines above the rest. Yes, obviously, Ina Sharples is an icon. So's Elsie. Annie Walker, absolutely fantastic. But Dennis Tanner was just one of those characters who you go into it, they put them in a scene, and you know you're going to smile at something. And I don't think you can say that for many other characters at all.
No.
Why?
I loved him.
Is he your most iconic and most favourite retro vintage character?
I can't remember. We've done so many top fives of people, and I can't remember if you've ever done an ultimate top 5. But
yeah, we did.
Did he go through the Corrie Eliminator?
Yes, yeah, we put him through.
Well, we're gonna find out.
We're gonna find out very soon when we have to do our grand finale of the Corrie Eliminator. That's gonna be very difficult. It's making me feel
tired.
But yeah, what a character, what an icon. I feel a little bit sad that he's not up there with the big names of Coronation Street, is he? You know, when you say to somebody, you know, name a character from Corrie's golden vintage era of the 60s, you're going to get Hilda, you're going to get Elsie, you're going to get Jack and Annie. You're going to reel off, most people will reel off a whole stream of characters, and they probably would never even think to mention Dennis Tanner, but they should, because he made he helped make classic Coronation Street just a brilliant programme.
And in an era of amazingly strong female characters, he held his own against them, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's difficult to get remembered in Coronation Street. It's more difficult to be remembered if you're a male character than a female character. But he is more memorable than, say, Harry Hewitt, or maybe even Jack Walker. I don't know. The men just kind of got dominated by the women, and I think that's as it should be. But yeah, you got to remember Dennis Tanner as well. And I like how Coronation Street put a little tribute up to him at the end of an episode a couple of weeks ago, even if it kind of killed the mood of the scene that preceded it. But I think, sadly, he's destined to fade in the memories of Coronation Street fans. But
no, he won't. Get yourself on YouTube and watch a Dennis Tanner episode.
Yeah. Go and do it.
Do it.
If anything we've said has inspired you, I mean, as we said, we're not all available on YouTube, but they're easy to find. Or even if you know that he's great, maybe you go and watch them anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, R.I.P. Philip Lowrie. Sadly, we didn't get you on the podcast for an interview, but do go and listen to the Distinct Nostalgia interview of him if you haven't heard it already. It's a really cracking listen. And that's all that ends our tribute to you. Any final words, Gemma?
No. That's it.
That's it. Gemma's just too cut up about the fact that it's all over, isn't she?
Yeah.
And we're also going to go and have our tea now.
Yes.
So many of our podcast episodes, it's like, anyway,
and then
we're going to have
home
then
and
we go home
tea.
and had our tea. So thanks, Philip, for all the laughs.
Yeah.
And goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed listening to this, and we will see you next time. Ta-ra.